Stoicism and the Art of Happiness by Kathrin Deshotels. Introduction. You've probably heard someone being described as stoic to express the fact that they do not tend to show their emotions. It might be a stretch to think this person is happier than others, but imagine being entirely in control of your emotions and what other people say and do having no impact on you. This means no matter what happens around you, your mood stays the same, making you the sole force that decides how you feel. You can achieve this sooner than you think, and if you read this book, you will be taken through the history and modern practices of Stoicism, and how it can change your life for the better. You will learn about the happiness triangle and the 4 virtues of Stoicism. If you follow these practices, you will stop speaking from a place of overcharged emotion inspired by outside forces and start acting according to virtue. You will learn to stop worrying about things that are beyond your control. In fact, you can even get to the point where you can control your own thought processes. Stoicism will allow you to make decisions that are good for you instead of being led by emotion to wherever it wants to take you. You will get in touch with your true core values. You will learn to accept unpleasant events as they come and not take them personally. At its center, Stoicism is a guide to finding inner peace, silencing the noise of the outside world, and tuning into your highest state of being. A practical philosophy. It is a common question: how do I become a happy person? Everyone has times where they do not feel happy. Let's face it, a lot of things happen in life that interfere with happiness: upsetting news, conflict with friends or family, and any other inconvenience you can think of. It's only natural that these events will set off negative emotions within you, such as sadness and anger. Sometimes these feelings will cause you to want to behave in ways that feel good at the moment, but will be harmful to you in the long run. The negative feelings and irrational responses to them will cause unhappiness and disorder in your life. You might feel like you do not have enough of something. Alternatively, something might have happened that you do not like. Sometimes we can focus so much on what does not exist that we do not take part in our actual lives. It is a widely held misconception that happy people are happy because they have the things we do not. However, no amount of possessions can bring happiness. Think about all of the highly successful and wealthy people who have opened up about struggling with the same emotional trials everyone else does. This goes to show that you cannot buy happiness. It has to come from an internal place. It is also very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I'm not happy because I don't have something, more friends, more money, a significant other, etc. If I had those things, I would become a happy person. This mentality will doom you to a lifetime of unhappiness. This is because you are always thinking about what you do not have. When you rely on external circumstances to be content with yourself, your happiness will have stability. Your mood will shift with everything that happens. When you practice Stoicism, you learn to make your mood and self-worth consistent and independent of outside forces. When happiness is internal, it is anchored. It is like when a piece of furniture has been secured against the floor. This means it cannot be pushed or pulled or taken anywhere other than where it is right now. You must find a way to secure your happiness into one place to make it constant. This is the true meaning of Stoicism. Many people think of a person who never shows any emotions when they hear the word stoic. This is not entirely accurate. In fact, the goal behind the belief is to achieve happiness. Being led by your emotions will cause unhappiness because you will feel like you are on shaky ground. Think about a time where you were in a good mood because something good had happened, or it was a special day, or you just woke up feeling nice. You woke up early and got dressed nice, had time to have coffee and sit outside. You thought this was going to be your day. You played your favorite music on the way to work. You practically skipped into the office, only to find that one of your coworkers was in a bad mood. They take it out on you and call your work ethic into question. Whatever they say to you, it brings your mood down, and now your low is proportionate to the happiness you felt earlier. You feel angry at this person for ruining your day. There is just one problem with that mentality. That person might have been rude to you, and when someone does that, you cannot help but be upset at the moment. However, it is your choice afterward whether to stay in that mental state or pick yourself back up. It was not your fault that they said something hurtful to you because that is outside of your control. However, when they are no longer in your presence, they can no longer be held responsible for you. At that point, they only have an impact on you that you let them have. You've probably heard the saying that people have the power you give them over you. Take this example. You might say that the person who was rude to you was to blame for your current mood. However, take a moment to take a look around. That person is nowhere around you. Someone who is not even present cannot be to blame for what you are doing. You must tell yourself, I am responsible for how I feel. If I let myself be miserable and this day ends on a bad note, it is on me. Letting your mood sink down because something bad happened is not the only option there is. You can think about something that makes you happy. You can turn on some uplifting or relaxing music. You can do any number of things that would distract you, and then you would not even be thinking about what happened anymore. You've probably heard that when you are feeling bitter about someone, you are giving them space in your mind rent-free. You do not have to do this. When we are miserable, we make a choice to be. Let me explain. When you are in a foul mood, you have to actively work towards this state of mind and preserve it. Think about one of those movies where a person goes through an upsetting event such as a breakup, and they retreat to the confines of their room while they churn over this. Their parents come in and tell them they made their favorite dish, and they say they are not hungry. Their friend calls them and asks them to come to the movies with them and say no. It might even get to the point where their pet comes to them and tries to cuddle, and they reject them. This means they had lots of opportunities to pull themselves out of this sadness, even for a little while, and they made a point to reject every single one of them. This was an active decision of theirs. It might even be explained within the movie that they could not spend time with their friends or play with their pet. However, this is incorrect wording. The correct way to say it is that they would not do any of these things. When you reject things that could give you happiness, you are making an active decision. In the case of the person in this movie, they could have decided to go and have dinner with their family. They would be surrounded by the company of people who love them. They might start talking with their parents and get onto a funny subject or go over a fond memory. And then they might look up sometime in the evening and realize it has been a while since they thought of the source of their sadness. At this point, it would feel a little bit smaller because they would realize the upsetting event is not an all-powerful force that can control their feelings. At this point, they would know that even though something painful had happened in their life, they could still do things that made them happier and move away from the breakup. When you give up your power and decide that you are not meant to be happy, you will continue to suffer. Then you truly will be trapped because you will be at the mercy of anything that happens around you. Once you say you have no control, you have relinquished it. However, you can get it back even after you have let it go. It is never too late to decide you are going to take control of your life back. One of the first things you need to do when you make this resolution is to decide you are going to do what it takes to make you happy. Happiness is not something any outside force can give to you. It is something you have to conjure up for yourself. It is said that happiness is a choice. Of course, this doesn't mean you can forget about all of your problems in the blink of an eye and never feel upset again. But think about it this way. Whatever we dwell in is what we become. This means if you focus solely on the bad things that happen to you, your life will seem very bleak. It can be compared to when you tune out other noises to listen to a particular one. Sometimes we can fall into a pattern where we tune out the positive aspects of our life. If you can't see one of those right now, think about something in your surroundings that is just there. It may not be exciting, but it is not hurting anyone either. You probably know someone who always seems unflappable. Things other people say don't get to them, and no matter how chaotic their life gets, they still manage to get everything done with time to spare and don't seem rattled while doing it. You could become like this person a lot sooner than you think by following the practice of Stoicism. Let's break down the aspects of this philosophy. Stoicism is much more than just not showing emotion. In fact, it could be said that this is a misunderstanding of the practice. Stoicism is about centering and controlling yourself. This does not mean repression. Actually, Stoicism is, in many ways, the highest form of expressing your true self because when a person is following the practice, they act according to their core values. Stoicism has been broken down into 4 virtues that have been borrowed from Greek philosophy. Here is an introduction to them. Justice. This refers to a person's sense of morality. When a person adheres to justice, they behave in an ethical way, both towards themselves and other people. Here is an example. A person finds a credit card lying around. If they act with justice, they will turn it in so it can go to its rightful owner. On the other hand, if they steal the person's identity to buy things for themselves, this would be unjust behavior. Prudence, otherwise known as wisdom, this refers to one's ability to make sound judgment calls that are good for them. They know how to recognize what is bad for them and avoid it. This could come in the form of a habit, relationship, thought process, and much more. Temperance. This is also called moderation. Essentially, it is knowing when to say when. Too much of anything is a bad thing, even something good. For example, if you work out too much, you will feel too sore to move, and your body will become depleted. Fortitude. The final virtue has to do with courage and mental strength. No one can avoid the feeling of fear, but you can decide how you respond to it. If you stand your ground and face your fears, you are demonstrating fortitude. Now, let's talk about the Stoicism happiness triangle. At the center of this circle is something known as eudaimonia. This could be compared to self-actualization. When a person has achieved this state, they have connected to the best version of themselves. They have made an identity for themselves and found inner peace while striving towards their goals. In the belief of Stoicism, eudaimonia is brought about by 3 qualities. It is a complete harmony between them. Without one, you cannot have the other 2. You will also find that they are connected. These 3 qualities work in a dance with one another to bring your life stability and help you reach peace. The first one is living with arete, a word that originated from Greece that means virtue. When you live with arete, you do not wish for something that isn't here yet while feeling a sense of happiness. Instead, you live each moment in a way that demonstrates your core values. The idea is that you achieve your goals by living by your values. You've probably heard the phrase, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. The same logic could be applied to living with arete. You do not need to have everything you want to have a good life. It does not mean you have failed. It just means your journey is still going. The second aspect of the triangle is focusing on what you can control. This is a very difficult thing for many people to uphold. We can wind up spending so much time thinking, what if a sudden disaster occurs? What if this person doesn't like me? And other questions such as this. The problem with worrying about things like this is that you do not have any real power over the outcome of these situations. Any perceived control you have over what decisions other people are going to make is just that, perceived. The only thing you are actually doing is wasting time and energy. This is why you need to turn your focus to what you can control, Examples of these are your performance, and work and self-care. The final part of the triangle is accepting responsibility. It is easy to become comfortable with pointing the finger at other people and blaming them for our own unhappiness. For example, someone says something rude to you, and therefore, you lose your temper. It might seem like the other person is at fault for making you angry, but then that places them in control of you and renders you a helpless bystander in your own life. When you live life this way, the words and actions of other people will decide your fate, and you will be at the mercy of everyone. Holding yourself accountable doesn't mean you beat yourself up. It means you realize when you have made a mistake and resolve to do better. It means you realize while something upsetting might have happened, you can choose whether or not you let it ruin your day. To not practice these ideals causes internal suffering. For example, imagine you have a friend who has started spending time with someone you don't think is good for them. You feel like this person could influence them to take on unhealthy behavior patterns, such as staying out all night partying and skipping class. You want them to stop associating with this person and fear for what might happen to them if they do not. In this situation, it will be extremely difficult to stop yourself from obsessing over it because you care about your friend and do not want to see them get hurt, but you will need to for the sake of your own sanity. You cannot directly impact what another person is going to do. You can only tell them what you think. That is the extent of your control. If they cannot or are choosing not to see the consequences this will bring them, that is something they will have to find out later. Sometimes when we get into the habit of thinking if we just hold on hard enough to something, we will be able to control it. However, what we will really do is cause emotional suffering for ourselves. In this situation, you would need to exercise prudence and focus on what you can control. Your friend has made their decision. The only choice in this matter that is yours is whether or not you make yourself a part of the fallout. You need to be able to act based on your own personal principles as opposed to what other people would want you to do. How you view yourself needs to be of higher importance than how others might view you. One of the most difficult aspects of focusing on controllable things that you will encounter is learning how to stop worrying about what other people think of you. This is because it is natural to want to be liked and accepted, and to a certain extent, this can be a good thing. There are certain mores and rules about how to treat people that we should all follow. However, sometimes people make this longing to be liked develop into an unhealthy obsession. The truth is that you will not be able to get everyone to like you. Think about how many people there are in this world, and how we all think differently. This means there will be people whose approval you will never be able to obtain. Most of the time, it will not be a matter of them hating. You are not the bad guy, and neither are they. The two of you are just not compatible. If their personality and interests are too dissimilar, this means you will be unable to relate to one another. Here is an analogy to show you how to think of Stoicism. Think about a turbulent ocean, and its waves are crashing against the cliff. However, the cliff remains standing. It doesn't seem to be affected by the waves. Even though the water is applying pressure on it to move backward, it does not. When you have mastered Stoicism, you learn to think and behave like this cliff. You do not get pulled into chaotic situations. When you learn to tolerate painful emotions, you will find inner peace. This does not mean to seek pain out. It simply means you know situations will come up in life that are painful and are prepared for them. Consistency in your mood is what you want to strive for. When your emotions are unpredictable and always changing, you will not be happy. You will never feel peaceful. You will be exhausted even though you will also have difficulty sleeping. When you endure hardship instead of running away from it, you will become stronger until you are able to become that cliff. Sometimes, this perseverance can make you have a change of heart about what is happening. You might have originally seen something as a misfortune, but some view it as an opportunity. When you change your attitude about a situation, you might start to see that it was not as bad as you thought. For example, your job application was denied. While this may be disappointing, it is not the end of the world. Your mind might be saying, "I'll never get hired." But that is not true. You were only turned down by one company at this particular time. Also, think of the good that came of this. Your resume was seen by someone. You had the experience of applying and possibly interviewing for a job. You might have noticed some mistakes you made and resolved to correct those next time. If you let yourself get discouraged, you'll miss out on these learning and growing experiences. In order to embrace Stoicism, you need to be able to get into the mentality of it. This philosophy places high emphasis on keeping your emotions in check despite what is happening outside of them. Think about a teacher you had that handled unruly children effectively. One of the reasons they were able to do this was most likely that they did not engage in the mind games these children tried to play. They did not get into a shouting match with them or show anger towards them, which would pull the learning environment to a halt in order to do something completely unproductive. They probably asked them to excuse themselves from the classroom if their behavior was too obnoxious. Stoicism is all about thinking and behaving in a practical way. This means a person does things that make sense, and that will contribute to their success. With the case of the two teachers, the one who keeps themselves in check and doesn't stoop down to the level of the students has their career in mind, and they know they will not provide a good classroom experience to the rest of the students if they do not act like the bigger person. You have to understand the point where your emotions have become a hindrance to you. Finally, Stoicism means being content with where you are right now. Of course, there are things we all would like to change about our lives. This means you have goals, and that is a good thing. However, it can become a detrimental force if you spend most of your time thinking about what you do not have, and it depresses you. You start to feel envious and resentful of other people. When you're in this state, you're likely not doing anything to get where you want to be. This is why it's so important for you to be happy with your life as it is right now, even if you want more. Be present in your real life. When something happens that is unpleasant, you must accept it. Trying to will it not to be so or pretend it doesn't exist will only perpetuate the situation. Denial is a state of mind that will cause more suffering than any real-life situation will. It doesn't even give you any actual relief from what is going on. This is because being in denial does not mean you don't know what is going on. You can see that something is not right but are refusing to look at it thinking that will make it go away. Not talking about something does not mean it is not there anymore. Imagine smelling smoke and seeing a small fire in your house, but turning away from it and saying, "That's not happening. There's no fire because I will not accept that." That sounds pretty silly, doesn't it? If you kept doing that, before you knew it, your entire house would be on fire, and your life would be in danger. The same thing happens with any other problem when you deny its existence. It only gets more severe until, eventually, it forces you to deal with it, and by then, it is too big, and you are not equipped enough to handle it. Back to the example of the house fire, eventually it would spread too much for there to be any possibility of salvaging your house, and you would be lucky to escape with your life. Now let's take that analogy and put it to a more likely real-life example. Let's say you are taking a class and have gotten a couple of bad grades. Naturally, being in and working on assignments for this class would start to cause anxiety. Looking at your previous grades would feel depressing. You would not want to think about it, and it would be very tempting to just hide from it. You get what you think is relief from tuning into your favorite TV shows or whatever other means of escape. When you are away from this class and not thinking about the grade, you feel better, and this might cause your brain to trick you into thinking this means you are doing the right thing. However, this plan would soon backfire, because then soon, the time would come for another test or assignment. If you hadn't spent any time working on the subject matter for this class, you would come into it just as unprepared as you had for the last one, and so you would get the same results as last time. This would mean another poor grade to bring down your average even more. A few more times of this, and it would become very difficult to salvage a passing grade out of this. The anxiety would grow more every day as the low scores pile on. This means that while denying a problem's existence might bring some temporary relief, it will eventually catch up to you. You must face a problem head-on because it will give more inner peace in the long run. In this example, think back to where you get your first bad grade. Your best bet is to go to your professor. Be honest with them about what is going on. Say, "I don't understand this material and need extra help." Don't worry. Your professor will not think less of you for this. In fact, they will have more respect for you because you are taking the initiative and are willing to humble yourself and admit that you are struggling. This is a way that throwing away your pride can work in your favor. It is never easy to say you are not understanding a subject. There is an embarrassment factor about feeling like you are behind the others. You fear judgment from your professor. It takes a special type of courage to ask for help. You don't want to be thought of in an unflattering light. You might also have worries about being singled out by your professor in the future if you do this. However, if you're having embarrassment about this one grade and the thought of asking for help on the subject, imagine how you will feel if the problem escalates and you have failed the class. Pride will stand in the way of you getting the things you need. Remember that no one is a master in every subject. Pride turns you to perfectionism, which is an unhealthy practice. You are telling yourself that the only acceptable outcome is a complete success. It also puts you at odds with other people. You start to see the world as a competitive place. People who need to constantly do things perfectly go through a lot of internal suffering. Victory is always a cause for celebration, and no one can avoid feeling a twinge of disappointment about a failure. This is perfectly normal. However, a perfectionist lives and dies by these successes and defeats. If they have lived up to their strict standards, they feel a temporary sense of finally having reached their goals. However, the time will inevitably come where they make a mistake, and this will devastate them. They take losses so personally. For example, let's say you particularly excel at a certain subject. You have grown accustomed to getting a large amount of praise from your peers and professors. However, no matter how good you are at something, you are going to have an off day where you are not on top of your game. You are going to get an answer wrong. A quiz score will come out a little lower than your usual performance. A perfectionist will become extremely distressed by this fact. There will probably be a lengthy internal dialogue of self-punishment. There might also be resentment for classmates who did well this time, especially if the teacher praises them for it. They might get into the mindset that if he praises someone else for their intelligence, he is implying that they are not intelligent. This is a form of making something about you when it is not, which will cause you unnecessary suffering. On the other hand, if the person practices Stoicism, they can write off that quiz as a mishap. Just shrug it off and say, "Well, that wasn't my best one. Maybe I need to study a little more." You might have just gotten a little complacent. When all of the material you've studied up until now has been easy for you, you might not feel the need to take it seriously. Maybe you just weren't feeling well that day. Either way, it is in the past and therefore out of your control. Stoicism turns off the vision towards uncontrollable things, and there is only one timeline you can have any impact on, that being the present. This is why it goes against prudence to let yourself become distressed about any other one. It is difficult to do this sometimes because fears will come into your mind about the future as well as unpleasant memories about the past. Your head might be swimming right now. I know this is a lot to take in, and the task seems like a heavy one. But don't worry. We're going to go through the history of Stoicism, how to think and act like one, and how to keep these behaviors up. It's mainly a mind over matter deal. Get yourself into the mindset that you can take your power back over your emotions, and you will succeed in it. When you have done this, no one will ever be able to influence you in a way you do not want them to again. A quick history lesson. One of the best ways to learn about a theory and how to bring it into your life is to learn the origin of it. Let's start by giving you a brief overview of how Stoicism came to exist and how it developed into what it is today. This way, you will be able to create your own understanding of the philosophy so that you can transform it into the iteration of it that will best suit your needs. Stoicism's roots come from Greece and Rome. There are three major philosophers who are often regarded as the ones who brought Stoicism to the forefront and developed it into what it is today. There were three clusters of people who were crucial to the development of Stoicism, and their influences on the theory were classified as the three different phases of it. The Stoic school of philosophy was fathered by Zeno of Citium, a Hellenistic philosopher. Studying cynicism under Crates of Thebes, Zeno found his basis in the pursuit of a virtuous life that is in agreement with nature. By using the reason afforded to humans and by rejecting the pursuits of wealth, power, being famous, and sex, the idea was to live a simple life thriving in the happiness that freed him from chasing those frivolous things that bring emptiness. As a wealthy merchant, Zeno survived a shipwreck while traveling from Phoenicia to Piraeus, and while in contact with a bookseller, he found Xenophon's Memorabilia. He was so intrigued by how the book captured Socrates and wondered where he might find men who lived like this. He met Crates, who happened by, and Zeno's appearance resonated with Crates because it did not belie his wealth. Zeno ultimately relinquished his wealth to live in poverty on the streets of Athens, and through study and immersion in the belief of cynicism, he carved root of Stoicism. This concludes what is known as the first phase of Stoicism. The second phase is known as Middle Stoa, and its primary influencers were Panaetius and Posidonius. In Rome, it is rumored that these scholars taught their theories to students. Whether or not this is true, we can be sure that there was a man known as Cato the Younger who developed his entire belief system around Stoicism. He embodied the idea of not compromising one's core values for anything. He refused to change his mind about anything, no matter what anyone else said to him. He believed in strict morals and that there were no exceptions. He thought if one did not do this for themselves, they would be susceptible to betraying their morals. His political stances became a template for Stoics that would come after him because of this, and because of the fact that he was against the ruler at the time, Julius Caesar, who at that time was considered to be a tyrant. Finally, we get to the late Stoa, led by Musonius Rufus, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. This is where Stoic philosophers became more literal with their teachings. In the past, it had been a very theoretical discussion. Basically, they were asking, what qualities would make a person the perfect Stoic? However, these more modern theorists delved deeper into it and began to paint the picture of what Stoicism would look like in real life. They went into the true ethics of a Stoic and how these morals and beliefs would be acted out in real life. It is one thing to make a broad and vague statement such as, live with virtue, and accept responsibility, but what does that mean? How would a person incorporate that into their lifestyle? That is when living with virtue became defined as less of a matter of acting based on a set of ethics and more of a matter of expressing yourself in the highest form. With this mindset, completing a painting, writing a book, or even scoring a touchdown in a football game could be considered living with arete. This is because you are tapping into your highest potential. Another interesting thing about the Stoic philosophy is the fact that it was quite progressive for its time. For example, they believed that women could live with virtue just as much as a man could, which was a far cry from the views of society at that time that women and men had their own separate worlds that it was best for them both to stay in. They also believed in holding men and women to the same moral standards. For example, they did not think it was right for female sexuality to be seen in a different light from its male counterpart. They thought there was something inherently wrong with there being positive connotations to one but not the others. In essence, they thought everyone should be seen equally. This meant everyone was responsible for their own actions and happiness. You might be thinking, I can't just go off and give up everything I have, that will never work. Fear not, you can still be Stoic even if you do not do that. In fact, that is an outdated practice and not a recommended one these days. The early Stoa had the most extreme ideas on keeping oneself grounded and not depending on wealth. In these phases of the theory, there was an extreme emphasis placed on limiting what you have. The purpose of this was so that people could be content with living without creature comforts. This was so that happiness could be completely internal. In fact, some iterations of Stoicism encouraged people to practice tolerating painful events to build up their mental fortitude, claiming if you were desensitized to it, it would no longer be able to hurt you. There was a great emphasis on depriving oneself so that they can be indifferent to both pleasure and pain. The aforementioned men would wear mere rags and forego shoes to keep themselves humble and to not fall into the pattern where they were chasing money and possessions. They considered themselves free of these confines after they made these decisions. Many of these concepts have had to be shed to fit modern times. In this year, you could not sensibly give up all of your wealth. You would be condemning yourself to serious hardship if you lived this way. This is because the cost of living is great now, with all of the bills and taxes that come with being a citizen. We are not in any way encouraging you to go into poverty. However, some of the values in this mindset could be used to keep you grounded now. Although the themes and morals of Stoicism have changed over time and will most likely be subject to change in the future, a few things remain constant. One is the theme of not wishing for more. It is one thing to create more for yourself, which is good. It is another to pinpoint the lack of something in your life as the source of your unhappiness, and thinking that would change if you got it. Instead of relinquishing your wealth, you can modify it to fit the time you live in. One of the ways you could do this is to not spend more than is sensible. Think very carefully before you make a big purchase. Sometimes people will buy cars, houses, and other large investments such as these without thinking clearly about it. There are also those times where we go to the grocery store to pick up a few things, but then see a number of things we like in there for fashion, entertainment, or something else of that nature. We know this item we are thinking of buying costs too much to be sensible for our budget, but we decide we need it because it will increase our happiness. Then we go throughout the store to buy more things with this mindset. After a while, we have bought a bunch of things that were unnecessary, and then we wind up being low on cash. You could combat this with Stoicism by going to the store with a list that you are going to strictly follow. Get what you need and nothing more. Once you have completed the list, leave the store, and do not look at anything more. When you do this, you will be improving your spending habits. Another is to pick what you focus on wisely because you will end up wasting a lot of time in your life if you do not. Imagine you are playing a game of checkers, and you control the red pieces. Whatever the person you are playing against does is entirely up to them. It is a waste of time and energy to think, I wish they hadn't made that move, now I won't get to do the one I was planning to do. Get that previously planned move out of your mind because it is gone. Shift your focus to the options you have now after the new developments. Of course, Stoics do everything they do for the purpose of remaining grounded in the sense of emotions. They do not believe in the romantic belief of following one's heart, as the heart does not tend to make good decisions. When one makes decisions using logic, they will actually be a happier person for it in the end. This is because they will not do something that is bad for them just because there might be emotional attachment involved. For example, they will not miss out on an opportunity of a lifetime for the advancement of their career for a relationship or friendship that may or may not work out in the end. They can see which choice would make the most sense for them and do not have objections about choosing it. When you are thinking about how to apply historical Stoicism to your life, think of Cato the Younger. You do not have to imitate him to the letter, but think about how steadfast he was in his beliefs. He was faced with a lot of criticism, and many people thought he was wrong. People would try to convince him of this, but he did not listen to them. For him, there was no such thing as gray. He thought you either live up to your values or you do not. For him, his morals were unrelenting. Having core values is essential to having self-esteem and being connected to yourself. The beautiful thing about Stoicism is that it leaves a lot of freedom for its followers. In many ways, they can decide for themselves what is important to them, and the ethics they value more than anything. The rule is more about how you treat said ethics. It could be anything. It might be the notion of being hospitable to guests. It might be the value of being involved in current events, or it might be preserving values of an older time. Whatever it is, find it and take it in close to you. Do not let anything or anyone come above it. Cato the Younger would never have backed down from what he believed in because someone else would not be his friend anymore if he continued to follow them. That person would be the one that had to go. This might seem harsh, but it is true that you become the people you surround yourself with. You become what you say and do. When you are having moments of doubt, think about the Stoics who came before you. Remember their teachings and then remind yourself of your own virtue, whatever that definition is for you. Do not worry if there are aspects of the ancient definitions of Stoicism you leave behind. This is nothing more than the age-old story of laws, theories, and beliefs evolving over time as they should. As long as you are putting your best foot forward, staying away from meaningless conflicts and troubles, and keeping yourself in the driver's seat of the direction your life takes, you are practicing Stoicism. It might seem like this is a daunting philosophy that only an elite few can follow, but it is really much more simple than that. It all starts in the way you think, which is why in the next chapter, we are going to delve into how a Stoic would think about the events happening around them in order to interpret and respond to them in the most effective way. Thinking like a Stoic. Now, we are going to delve into the mind of a Stoic. It is not much unlike yours. In fact, there is a part of you that is already wired to be one. It comes in the form of that voice in your mind that says, "You need to do this because it is good for you." Or, "That isn't a good idea." This is good news because it means there is nothing you need for this undertaking that you do not already have. Now, it is just a matter of putting these resources to good use and making sure that voice, the logical one, is the one you listen to whenever you need to make a big decision. Before we do anything else, I want to stress the importance of making yourself the ruler of your own world. The first thing you need to know about thinking like a Stoic is that they would assume the power of their thoughts and actions. A Stoic holds themselves accountable for both their successes and their wrongdoings. They do not fall into the victim mentality, in which a person points the finger at other people when something goes wrong in their lives, knowing that only keeps you stuck where you are at today. When you are put yourself into the role of a victim, you are stuck where you are. That is the entire concept of a victim. You do not have any control over what happens to you. Other people decide your fate, and you can only react to what they do. Some people consistently hold this mindset until it becomes a way of life for them. In fact, that is what it is called, victim mentality. No matter what we do, we are gaining something from it, even if it is elusive to us on the surface. When a person assigns themselves to victim status, Their gain is the lack of culpability for their actions as well as inaction. Here's an example of that. You've probably known at least one person who often talked about a dream they would have liked to pursue, writing, acting, singing, but didn't, or, in their words, couldn't as a result of outside circumstances. They talk about a person who wouldn't let them, or how the world never presented an opportunity to them. They often say they would have achieved worldwide success had they not been held back. They get to imagine this because they never actually put themselves out there and tried. They didn't contact any publishers, go to any auditions, etc. because they never tried, they never failed, and that places the blame solely on others, leaving the person free to resent them for being the sole thing that stood between them and what they wanted. The downside to victim mentality is the same thing as the upside. The person is not responsible for anything that happens to them. They take their hands off the wheel and let life happen to them, and then become frustrated at the results. If you know a person like this, you probably often hear about a problem of theirs that you can see a clear and quick resolution to. When you point it out, you will be met with, "But I can't do that because..." And this reason is most likely yet another problem they could quickly solve if they wanted to. A conversation with this type of person is never productive. You will become frustrated after a while because all you can do is listen to problems they have rendered unsolvable. This person also becomes frustrated with themselves because they always shoot down a potential opportunity or solution for what is plaguing them. With this in mind, we need to understand the difference between can and won't. When a person can keep their temper under control, it is actually a refusal to do so. It is telling the world they can control you. If they just talk to you in an inflammatory way, they can reduce you to pure anger. When you give in to an emotion, especially anger, you take your hands off the wheel. Things we say in the heat of the moment are often complete departures from what we really think. In many ways, the Stoicism silences unnecessary noise so you can listen to your true self. This is because emotions are not always accurate. They are often fleeting responses to what is going on around us. Feelings are how we interpret the outside world from moment to moment. This means they are not always a reliable source of information. In fact, the most dangerous time to act is when you are feeling overcome with emotion for many reasons. You can end up saying something that is not only going to hurt the feelings of someone you care about but goes against what you actually think. It can cause you to throw your hands up and decide there is nothing you can do, resolving to stop trying. Your mind will tell you things that are not real sometimes. You do not have to have any form of mental disorder for this to happen to you. In fact, it is a habit that everyone struggles with sometimes. I'm going to bring some psychology into this to talk about emotional reasoning. It is relevant to Stoicism because it explains why thoughts and feelings are not always accurate, and therefore, should be analyzed before they are acted upon. Because the messages we get from our brain can be so persistent and emotionally charged that we can be tricked into seeing them as real despite the lack of any evidence to support it. Essentially, we accept something is true without proof to support it because of a hunch. A common example is a person thinking their romantic partner is no longer interested in them or having an affair. This is emotional reasoning when the partner has not changed their behaviors in any way that would warrant this type of suspicion. In this case, it is all in the person's mind. They think, "I feel like my partner is cheating on me. I wouldn't have thought that if it wasn't true. Therefore, it must be happening." This will cause them to act differently toward their partner, more warily, and most likely questioning them more often. This will cause the other person's behavior to become different, which in turn will confirm the person's thoughts that something in the relationship has changed, not realizing the fact that the change began with them. Emotional reasoning is dangerous because it causes a person to make major decisions based on misinformation. This is why we cannot interpret a feeling or thought as a refutable proof that something is true. Having an irrational thought does not make you an irrational person. Everyone has them, most likely on a daily basis. Your behavior becomes irrational when you act on the thought. Another time people tend to use emotional reasoning is when they are arguing with someone. You might think in a moment of passion, "I can't stand this person," when you normally think of them as a close friend. Thoughts like these sometimes cause us to say things that are hurtful, and we regret later. This is why you really need to think about what you are about to say when you are feeling angry. You need to ask yourself, is this really what I feel? Will I feel proud of myself about saying this later? The answers to both of these questions will most likely be no if what you want to say comes from a place of anger. With this in mind, it is a good thing to control your emotions. It will save yourself and others a great deal of distress. You will not damage your relationships with harsh words and then subsequently have to try to repair them. When you are engaging in thought or behavior, ask yourself, is what I want to say going to add anything productive to the conversation? Having a thought about something does not mean you are bound to act upon it. Thoughts do not exist in the real world. If you write it off and let it go, it will do just that. You probably will not even remember the thought later on because long-term memory does not retain most thoughts. If it is not important, it will be forgotten. The intensity of emotions can trick us into thinking they have power over us. The only way that can happen is if we give them that power. If you are experiencing a high level of anxiety, you might feel a sense of impending doom, like something terrible is just about to happen to you or someone you care about. When this is happening to you, try this. Think about the biggest worry in your life from a couple of years ago. It's likely that it has been long since resolved, and you never think about it anymore. This goes to show that emotions are fleeting, and that is why you should not make permanent decisions based on them. This ties into the practice of focusing on what you can control. Worrying about things you cannot impact will inevitably cause you to be overcome with emotion. You will be conjuring up more and more worries and disastrous predictions. This means images of things that have not even happened yet and maybe never will are tormenting you. There is also a sense of frustration that comes with thinking about things that you cannot influence the outcome of. This is because the thought is distressing, and you also know you are powerless over the situation. Things outside of you will happen the way they will. Do not assign powers to yourself that you do not actually possess. Everyone does this at times. For example, sometimes people develop the idea that bad things will not happen if they worry about them and vice versa. For example, if they make it to work on time after a late start, they will attribute this to the fact that they spent the entire drive there panicking about the time and conjuring up images of being fired. In another instance, they are eating and spill something onto their shirt. They think about how they were not worried about spilling their food and assume this is why it happened, which confirms the theory in their mind. This is known in psychology as magical thinking. Essentially, this is when we trick ourselves into making connections between our thoughts or behaviors and the things that happen in the real world. This makes us give ourselves abilities as well as responsibilities that we do not actually have. It is what causes us to think something is our fault when it happened outside of us. Think about that old saying, "Don't step on a crack, or you'll break your mother's back." While this is just a children's rhyme, if someone actually developed the mentality that they would be responsible for an injury that happened to their mother if they were to step on a crack in the ground, they would be taking part in magical thinking. Using a Stoic's mentality, you recognize magical thinking as a practice that goes against prudence. This is because it is not good for you, as it only causes stress. Putting the blame on yourself that does not belong there is not living with virtue. You cannot be the best version of yourself if you are trying to figure out how you should be held accountable, say, for a car accident that happened miles away from you. Car accidents happen because of errors that one of both of the car's drivers made. It is not because of a ritual you forgot to perform or a thought you had. This type of thinking is irrational. This is where we will discuss placing undue importance on yourself and why it is detrimental to your mental health. As a disclaimer, this is not to say you do not matter. What we mean by importance here is you having an impact on circumstances outside of you or others being solely focused on you. When we think everyone else's behaviors are a direct response to us, it can make us crazy. Say you join an organization, and less than a week later, a longtime member quits. You had never met that person before this week, and therefore share no history with them, and yet you feel like their reason for leaving the group must be about you, that your presence somehow offended them enough for them to leave something they had invested a lot of time into. Let me tell you now that it is almost impossible that they left the group over you. You have not known each other long enough for there to be a serious problem between you. If you do not recall a negative interaction, there probably wasn't one. Consider the other possibilities for the actions of others before you assign yourself as the source of them. Perhaps this person had to leave because they had a family emergency. Maybe there had been a dispute between them and one of the members, and this just happened to be the week where it all came to a head. We only have the information that has been passed on to us. You cannot determine someone else's motives because you are not inside their mind, and you do not know what experiences they have had to lead them to the decision they are making. Also, think of this. Even if you and that person had a problem, it was still their decision to leave the group. They could have done any number of things instead, such as talking to you about the problem and trying to come to a solution, or even just deciding that the two of you would stay civil but otherwise stay away from one another. Remember the happiness triangles principle. Focus on what you can control. This situation would not be among the spectrum of your control. While you need to hold yourself accountable for your actions, you need to do the same to other people. If someone tries to say they made a decision they didn't want to because of you, do not listen to them. They are just trying to put the blame on someone else for their own mistakes. Now, let's talk about facing up to your own struggles and doing so the right way. A Stoic does not spend time on something that serves them no purpose. Take inventory of your life and what it is being filled with. When you do this, you will have to be very honest with yourself. Also, take this activity in the spirit it is intended for. This is not a time for you to shame yourself about your shortcomings. This will actually encourage bad habits because your self-esteem will be lowered. Say you want to change what you eat because you have noticed your diet consists of too much junk food and too few nutrients. If you insult yourself for this, you will feel embarrassed. The strange thing about a bad habit is that feelings of shame about it will make you cling harder to it. This is because the only thing that brings relief from that painful sensation is indulging in the habit, which provides pleasure and, therefore, relief. Now, the problem is that you have to do it more and more often in order to escape the negative emotions. This is known as the shame cycle. That is how any form of addiction or unhealthy behavior is perpetuated. One of the most common impractical things people do is to beat themselves up for mistakes they have made in the past. If you do this, your mindset will be chaotic. You will have a hard time acting with virtue if you do not feel good about yourself. You might feel like what you have done is too much to come back from. Everyone feels like that whenever they have done something wrong. You might even feel like it is wrong to forgive yourself and move forward. However, if you do not, you will not be able to become a better self. For one, whatever this big wrong thing is that you have done is probably not as bad as your mind has made it out to be. Even if it is, you cannot afford to dwell on it. If you think it is only you that you will punish, you are wrong. Have you ever been around someone who constantly beats themselves up over everything that goes wrong? It probably wasn't a very enjoyable experience. It is uncomfortable to be around them because they are always serious and uptight. Doing anything with them becomes stressful because you are worried that something will go wrong, and then they will begin their self-punishment. They take normal losses and rejection very personally. When they do something wrong, everyone feels the effects of it. When you do a self-punishing ritual, everyone else feels it too. This is because it makes it so that no one can move on from it. When you've had that experience with someone else, you probably had to spend a great deal of time trying to make them feel better and convince them that they are still a good person. While you feel for the person the first couple of times because of their internal struggles, the task of building them up will begin to become tedious because it never seems to yield any results. You will start to feel annoyed about the person and cringe whenever something goes wrong. When you think about it this way, people with overly developed consciences are not better people. You might think you are doing right by not letting yourself off the hook and holding yourself to what you've done. However, that is not what holding yourself accountable is about. It should be a movement towards self-improvement, not a torture device. As long as you live in the past, you are keeping everyone involved trapped in an unpleasant moment. In this sense, you are keeping everyone else on the hook in your attempt to properly chastise yourself. This is why when you mess up, you have to move on. Do less putting yourself down and more building yourself up. This does not mean thinking you are perfect. It means you give yourself constructive criticism. Instead of telling yourself, "You slob, you eat too much junk food," talk to yourself the way you would to a friend you are concerned about and want to help. Try an internal dialogue that is more like this. "My eating habits need to improve. I'm going to do this by cutting back on junk food and opting for more vegetables. Before long, I will look and feel much better." This is constructive criticism. The problem with the first dialogue is that there was merely punishment. It would be like sending a child to their room and telling them behave badly, but never telling them what they did wrong. Another thing a Stoic does is not take things personally, especially when they shouldn't be. For example, a person might think something bad happening to them is a punishment for something they did wrong in the past, or that some form of higher power is angry at them and wants to punish them by throwing hardships into their life. This is known as a cognitive distortion. Essentially, this is an incorrect assumption about the way that the world works. In psychology, it is believed that many of a person's problems stem from these incorrect beliefs, and that the goal of therapy should be to turn them into more healthy thought processes. Let's say something goes wrong with your car on your way home from work. It may be inconvenient, but you can be assured that this is not a punishment from a greater force. It is not any retaliation towards you, nor is it persecution. Everyone runs into car trouble at some point. If you fall into this type of thinking, you will spiral into a cycle of paranoia. When you jump to the conclusion that a random misfortune is a personal attack, you will begin to think the world around you is conspiring against you. Your quality of life will go down because you will be living in fear. You will also begin to feel resentful towards the world because you feel like it is attacking you. Just because something that happens to you is unpleasant, it does not mean it is personal. I know it is easy for your mind to make that leap because what is happening feels like an attack. However, it was just an event. Think about when leaves are falling off of a tree. They do not choose somewhere specific to land. They just land wherever the wind takes them. The things that happen in life are just as random. When you start thinking some malignant force wants to specifically make you unhappy, think of the leaves. This one just happened to land near you. Another common mistake is making your happiness depend on outside sources. Many people fall into a pattern where they feel unhappy and blame it on having something they do not want, or not having something they want. They talk about what they wish had not happened or what someone else should have given them. Even when the person they blame is no longer a part of their lives, they hold them accountable for holding them back in life and making them unhappy. The problem with this thinking is that you will always have some sort of problem going on. There are very few moments we have in life where everything is going well, and there is nothing to worry about. This means at any given time, there will be something that is causing you to be unhappy. This is why your happiness needs to come from the inside. When I say happiness is a choice, I do not mean you can just start ignoring all of your problems. I mean, you can choose to not let these events bring you more discomfort than they warrant. For example, you are driving, and someone makes a rude gesture at you. You have a choice at this moment. You can become angry in retaliation and give them your own gesture, letting this event set up the tone for your day. You can also decide that the person is just immature and not think about them again after they are gone. If you do not let them, they can never have an impact on you again. It is a false belief that you are powerful when you are angry. Actually, the person who has angered you is the one who has the power over you. You are never weaker than when you are screaming at the top of your lungs in a blind rage. You have absolutely no control over what you are thinking or feeling. In fact, some people talk of feeling like they have blacked out when they get angry enough, and then they do not remember what they said or did. There is nothing powerful about having undocumented time. When a person cannot control their anger, their relationships are often strained. They have difficulty holding down a job. They have a lot of incidents in their life that they look back on with embarrassment. When you decide you are going to control your emotions, you are making the resolution to take charge of your life. You are taking your power back. Think about when we were discussing fortitude or mental strength. Every day, we face challenges. If you went through today, did everything you were supposed to do, and persevered no matter what setbacks were thrown your way, then congratulate yourself. You showed fortitude and therefore adhered to one of the core principles of Stoicism. You have won half the battle when you decide, I'm not going to let this keep me down. In order to be stoic, you need to make your happiness stable no matter what is going on outside of you. Earlier, we talked about being happy, even if you do not have what you want. You might not feel fortunate based on the fact that there is a lot that you want. However, also think of it this way. If you have the time to want things, it means you are getting everything you need. If your biggest problem is not having something that is a luxury but not a necessity, it means all of the basic needs, the ones you need for your survival such as food, water, and shelter, are being met. Often we think too much about what we wish we had and do consider the fact that we are not doing without any of the necessities. There are people in this world who do not know where their next meal is coming from, or do not have a home or are trying to live off of the land. You do not need to feel guilty for having these things. Just think of it as an opportunity to put your problems into perspective. It is a part of being grateful. All of us could use a lesson in being grateful once in a while. That is why every year, there is a day dedicated to giving thanks for what you have. However, it doesn't have to be Thanksgiving to take time to be grateful. If you find yourself often feeling down about and wishing for more, and it is affecting the quality of your life, try this short exercise. At the end of every day, gather 5 things you are grateful for. It might take a little while at first. It always does when you haven't done this exercise. This is because we have to get back into this habit. Also, remember that it does not have to be this great fortune. It could be a small pleasure in life. For example, you found a quarter. You might have watched a beautiful sunrise. Someone you live with might have brought you coffee this morning, or you had time to cuddle with your pet. Think about a song you discovered recently that you really enjoyed. The things you give thanks for can be this mundane. If you repeat this exercise at the end of every day, you will notice a change in the way your mind works. Your thoughts have an impact on your actions and personality, and you do have the ability to influence your thoughts. Thinking about things you are grateful for will change what you focus on. Sometimes we can make bad situations worse in our minds and minimize the good. If you do this, you will naturally think of your life as being unhappy. Let's do a disclaimer first. You cannot control every thought that passes through your mind. There will be rogue thoughts that carry no meaning. They will come in and out of your mind without any to-do made of them, and this is what should happen. However, the general flow of your thoughts can be affected. This means whether they are generally positive or negative, benevolent or malignant, and so on. This is why this book has placed emphasis on not dwelling on slights against you, because if that is all you think about, you will become a bitter person. You can stop these thoughts from entering your head. It is everyone's responsibility to do it. If you find your thoughts becoming more resentful, you need to tell yourself, I need to stop this. Some people physically stimulate themselves to discontinue a thought. Sometimes they do this by clapping their hands. This is because the motion and the noise will interrupt your train of thought. Think about a time you have been in deep thought, and then a loud noise brought you out of it. You probably even forgot whatever you were thinking about. In this case, that would be a positive thing. When you cut negative thoughts off at the pass, you can make room for more positive ones. If you have been thinking negatively for a long time, making the transformation into a positive thinker is going to be difficult. It is something you are going to need to make a consistent and genuine effort. Think about how many times those more bleak thoughts have run through your mind. It would be impossible to count that. This means you will not change your outlook on life just by trying to change your thoughts a few. This will need to be a matter of repetition. Think about when it is a new year. You have gotten so used to writing down the previous year on checks and other papers that it is your instinct for a while. At first, you need to make a conscious effort to write the current year. You will probably accidentally write the last one a few times and need to erase it and replace it with the correct one. However, after you have repeated it a few times, it will be second nature to write the correct year. This is how changing your thoughts works. The moment you decide to do it isn't when you start to see the change. You will need to persevere in changing your thoughts. There will be a period of time where you are putting in the effort but not seeing results. This is going to be frustrating, and it will be when you are tempted to give up. It is the most important to keep going when it seems the least worth it. The rewards for your efforts will not always be immediate. Think about how many times you had to fall over before you mastered riding a bike. It is said that either you win or you learn. It might be disappointing when you do not get the results you want, but think about what you gain from the experience. For example, you have struggled with anxiety about interacting with others in the past, and you are trying to broaden your social circle. You ask someone to come to an event with you. They decline. You might feel like this is a defeat, and it could be tempting to give up on a social life over this. However, you also need to think of the victories that were had at this moment. You did not have the courage to talk to anyone before, and now you are able to initiate social events. Next time you might have more luck, and now you know that you are capable of being bold. Thinking like a Stoic is all about being where you are right now, taking the good news as well as the bad, and then picking yourself back up to take on another day. When you can think like a Stoic, you can act like one, which is exactly where our journey is going to lead us next. Acting like a Stoic. We've talked about how to think like a Stoic. Now it's time to apply it to the real world. Remember that there is a difference between the idea of something and the act. You can tell yourself that you are never going to let outside forces affect you again, but then real life comes along. You need to be able to keep these practices up when they count. Keeping your emotions in check is going to be a lifelong process, something you are going to need to put effort into each and every day. They say charity begins at home. So does Stoicism. You should keep your living space clean to feel a greater sense of order in your life. It is said that a cluttered house is a marking of a cluttered mind. It is harder just to navigate in your own home when it is dirty. The visual this creates is also depressing. You need to take pride in your own home. This is a part of living with virtue. You need to beautify your life. When the clothes are piling up in the laundry basket, and dust is piling up on the floors, and you look at that sight without caring, it means you are divorced from your own life, and arrayed is absent from your life. It is a sign you need to start caring about what your life looks like, both inside and out. You will be surprised at how differently you will feel about things when you have cleaned your living space. For one, you will no longer be trying so hard to find things, which will reduce your stress. You will feel more organized. You will have pride in your house and be excited for the company as opposed to dreading it. The appearance of your surroundings will be ones you are proud of and want to look at rather than things you try to ignore and convince yourself are not that bad. When you can own the space you live in, you have created a space where you can strategize about how you are going to take on your day. It will be somewhere you can go to whenever you need to retreat after you have been overstimulated, which is the next thing we will be discussing. One of the first lessons you need to learn is pausing before you act when you are feeling emotional. The first stream of messages going through your mind is just noise. Think back to when we talked about emotional reasoning. You do not need to acknowledge every thought and feeling that passes through your mind. When you do this, thoughts that are strange and unsettling will seem like a threat. This, in turn, will cause you to have anxiety about them. This is because you are viewing them as an entity with power rather than just the meaningless passing thing that it was. Another part of embracing Stoicism is to put the words and actions of other people into perspective. There is nothing that will make harsh words from someone else not feel painful. However, the importance you place on them will decide how much they impact you. Remember that you do not have to take every criticism that is made towards you seriously. Someone saying something about you does not make it true. Also, remember this, what they were saying might not be as bad as you think. Before you do anything else, you need to do is to determine whether what the other person did was truly a personal attack against you. Sometimes we can develop a false assumption that we are being criticized. For example, a person might be looking at you, and you think there is something wrong with the way you look. This is flawed thinking because you do not have a way of knowing whether or not that was really what they are thinking. They might have been looking at you because they liked your outfit and were wondering where you got it. They might have thought you looked like someone. It might not have even been you they were looking at, but someone or something else entirely. There are a lot of different reasons someone could be looking towards you without it being that they think badly of you. Even if the worst-case scenario is true, this can still go on without even being a blip on your radar. It will not be easy at first, but over time you will be able to tap into the side of you that can move on from disapproval. Stoicism will also teach you that not every outside stimulus requires a response. Let's say that a person really is looking at you because they are silently judging you in some sort of way. Who is this person to you? Have you ever seen them before? Will you ever see them again? The answer is probably no. In this case, what impact will their criticisms have on you? It'll probably be a passing thought for them before they move on to the next thing. They might whisper to the person with them. They might tell their friends who you will never meet, and they will never see your face. Within the next day, they would not be able to pick your face out in a crowd. This person's thoughts will literally have no impact on your life. In that case, even if they are looking at you with judgment, you can still go on with your day, enjoying yourself. In this case, you have won because you are having a good time while they are feeling bitter. Also, think about the kind of person who would truly take the time to cast judgment onto someone they have never met. This is the marking of a very negative person. It says a lot more about them than it does about you. Also, think of this. A person who spends their time thinking bad thoughts about others tends to suffer from low self-esteem. They need to bring other people down in order to feel good about themselves. It is a means of projection. This means even though they are making a statement about you, it is more about themselves. A person like this will continue to do this throughout their entire lives. They will speak ill about others to you and about you to those same people. This means they have nothing better to do with their lives than to discuss what is going on outside of them, likely because they do not like the way their own life is going. However, this is their problem, not yours. It will be up to them to fix this if they ever want to. Until then, the only thing you can do is to make sure you are living in a way that is true to yourself, because that is the only way you will ever be happy. You have to find a way to make yourself able to live your own authentic life regardless of what others say. You are not going to have a flawless reputation, no matter what. Also, think about this. Even if people notice and say things about you, it is a very small part of their day. It will be a fleeting thought and nothing more. This means it should be nothing more than a blip on your radar. Now, this is easier said than done because we are wired to want validation from others and to be liked. So how do we combat this? For one, weigh out what this one person has said about you compared to what everyone else has. Think about the people who are important in your life, are close to you, and that you have contact with on a day-to-day basis. This means your friends and family. These are the people whose opinions of you really matter. If someone tells you that you are annoying or impolite, think about the times other people have said differently. This will help you keep from listening to one person who said something that was rude and uncalled for. It is as simple as when you are picking out what to wear for the day. If you wear something you think someone else will like, but you are not fond of it, it will show on your face and in your behavior. This means you will not act confident, which will make you not look as good as if you just went ahead with what you wanted to wear all along. Now take this idea and apply it to who you want your friends to be. Now put it into what you want to spend your free time doing. Then, if this is what you want, use it when you are deciding who you would rather have as your significant other. When you adopt this mentality, you will be doing a service to yourself and to everyone else. You will be happy, and the people around you will know who you really are. Another thing Stoics do not believe in is complaining about their problems. While this will not always be avoidable, there is something to be said about not wallowing in your own problems. No amount of, "This should have been done for me, and I shouldn't have done that," and so on is going to help you. You've probably met someone who had a chronic habit of self-pity. Most likely, they weren't successful because they talked themselves out of doing something before they even began to do it. Constant self-pity will lead to a defeatist attitude. It also means your situation will never change. If you need to verbalize it, do so. Just say out loud, "It's time to stop feeling sorry for yourself and do something about it." We've talked about time management. A bad habit we all fall into at some point is procrastination. Many times it happens when you are assigned a long project about something you do not find interesting. You also might not be sure about what you are supposed to do. Whatever the reason is, you put off doing it until the last minute, and then you have to do it all in one sitting, worrying the whole time about whether or not you will be able to complete the project on time. Often, when we procrastinate, the time we should have been using to work on these projects is filled up with a leisurely activity, such as watching TV or playing on the computer. When we do this for long periods of time, it means there is a lot of wasted time. A person who procrastinates regularly will often complain about never having enough time and always being busy. If you never feel like there are enough hours in the day, you need to take a long and hard look at what you are doing throughout the day. There might be things you need to change about the way you spend your day. If you see that watching TV takes up a little too much time, consider shaving down how long you spend doing it. There might be a friend who you spend too much time talking to. They might be a needy person who you have to invest a lot of energy into. Because so much happens in our lives, it can be difficult to figure out what the source of our problems is. One way you can help organize your life is to keep a written record of the most important parts of it. When you write down your emotions, you can deal with them in a way that makes sense and is good for you. You might even figure out some things you didn't know about yourself. For example, you are writing about your partner, and you realize you are bothered by the fact that you haven't spent much time together recently. Now, instead of it coming out in a rush and in a way that accuses your partner of being neglectful, you can deal with the problem in a level-headed manner. You can tell them you miss spending time with them. You can suggest going on a road trip this weekend. You can do something proactive. Stoics think proactively instead of reactively. When a person takes a reactive approach to their life, they do not prepare for what is going to happen. They are not in charge of what is going on. Things happen around them, and the only thing they can do is react to the situation. They take their hands off of the wheel. When you are proactive, on the other hand, you prepare yourself for every possible scenario so you can prevent avoidable problems and properly manage the unavoidable ones. For a real-life example, we are going to compare two students. Jane doesn't show up to class on time, takes no notes, and doesn't take advantage of after-school study opportunities like student instructors and tutoring. She also puts off doing her assignments until the last minute. When grades are being finalized, she is in a frenzy trying to get everything done, often resorting to pulling all-nighters, all the while fearing she will not pass her classes. She has to resort to begging the teachers for extra credit, some who may not take kindly to students doing this at the last minute. She then blames the teachers for not instructing the class well. Lisa, however, pays attention in class and has all of her future assignments written out in a planner, so no due dates will sneak up on her. She completes all of her assignments ahead of time. At the end of the course, Lisa can relax, knowing her grades are going to be good, and she ends the year in a calm and orderly fashion. Jane and Lisa are taking the exact same class but have an entirely different experience in there. Lisa lightens her own burdens while Jane creates problems for herself. Accepting responsibility is something we all struggle with from time to time. Earlier I mentioned the example of having an outburst of anger due to someone being rude. That is going to happen at times, no matter how much you work to keep your emotions in check. However, if this happens consistently, you might need to take a look at how you respond to situations. Upsetting things are going to happen to you. It is a fact of life. Life is a series of good and bad things happening to you. Sometimes it will be better, while at other times you will struggle more. When a person does not hold themselves accountable, they will say, "I had a bad day, of course, I was rude to my friend. Anyone would be after the kind of day I had." However, this logic does not hold up to proper scrutiny. For one, whatever upsetting events happened to you today, they did not have anything to do with your friend. This means you are punishing someone for something they did not do. If you let yourself lose control like this and take your frustrations out on this person, you will make a bad day worse. If you go off on them, you are going to hurt their feelings. This is going to make them either avoid you or retaliate. At this point, on top of whatever else happened, you will have had a conflict with someone you care about. Now think about the alternative way things could play out in this situation. You acknowledge that it has been a rough day, but you decide to leave it behind. It has already happened, and there is no undoing it. You have already lived through it, and so there is nothing more to do about it. When you meet up with your friend, you see this as an opportunity to move on from that unpleasantness. You decide you are going to talk about something completely unrelated to them. You go out and have a great time together. This makes it so that your day ends on a completely different note from where it began. Even at the end of your day, you can still change it. At the last minute, something better can come along. This is why you cannot decide to give up, no matter how bleak things look. What kind of mood you end your day in is something you can control, which ties back into a central point of Stoicism, which makes up a third of the happiness triangle. When you focus on what you can control, you might start to notice changes you can make to your life to improve the quality of it. When we think about the things that happen that are out of our control, it can make us feel hopeless. You start thinking about all of the things that happen outside of you and yet impact your life, and you might start to wonder, is there anything I can control? This will tempt you to take your hands off of the wheel because you reason there is no point in trying to control your life because something else inevitably will. It is true that outside forces can put you in a fix, but it is also true that you can choose to let these events destroy your life, or you can think, I can't do anything about that, but here is what I can do about this. The place we are in is of our own making in many ways. However, it is easy to get into a pattern of thinking that says, I can't, or I'm trapped. For example, a person might not feel fulfilled in their relationship and think, I'm unhappy because I am stuck in a loveless relationship. However, this is not true. You are not stuck in a relationship. You might think you need to stay with this person because of the amount of time you have been with them. But that is a mental wall you have put up between you and doing what you actually want to do. When you first started seeing this person, you thought it would be a good thing. Now they have shown that they have personality traits that you cannot stand to live with. You didn't have a choice in that person revealing or developing these traits. That is why you have to think about the choice that is in front of you now, either to stay with them or to leave. That is where your point of impact comes in. Forget about trying to change them. That is never going to happen. You can only change your arrangement with them. Imagine you know someone who always asks you for $1 when you see them. You begin to feel resentful towards them because you never have $1 for yourself. Wishing they would stop asking for your dollar isn't going to work, because that is their decision. You might think, they always take my dollars. This may be true, but they are not taking them by force. You are giving them what they asked for. You might feel a sense of obligation to give it to this person so as not to disappoint them, but that is not the same thing as actually being forced to do it. After you start telling them no a few times, they will start to realize they aren't going to get what they want from you and move on to someone else. In order to keep your emotions in check, you need to sort them out. It was hinted at before, and now I'm going to explain the importance of writing your emotions down. That is why you should keep a journal. Record events from the day in it, and how they make you feel. Often we go through the day without even recognizing the impact its events had on our psyche. The danger to this is the fact that if you don't acknowledge something, that doesn't make it go away. It only makes its presence stronger. When people refuse to admit something, it will bottle up until it comes out at an unbidden time and in a way you don't expect. Imagine shaking a bottle of soda and then opening it. This is what will happen without self-control. This is why it is so powerful to write down what you are feeling. We do not even realize it, but when we speak, we censor ourselves. We choose our words based on what will be well received by others as opposed to what we are really feeling. However, when you are writing it down, you will not do that. You will say exactly what you want to, and in a private document that no one but you will ever read. This is a good thing. Unfortunately, sometimes a journal will not be available, and there will be a task at hand. There will be times when you have to get through a situation even though you have other things plaguing your mind. For example, you might have had an argument with your partner, but still have a business meeting to attend to. Your emotions might feel all over the place right now, but you cannot let this show at the meeting, or you will come off as unprofessional. First, you would need to get your breath under control. Sometimes, when we are stressed, we can forget to breathe evenly. Breathe in slowly and then out in the same fashion. You will immediately feel some relief when you do this. This is because holding your breath can make your head feel like a pressure cooker. Sometimes you simply have to tell yourself, I can't think about this problem right now. I have another one that needs my attention more. In the example above, your business meeting has to take precedence because we are talking about your career and source of income, and you do not want to seem like you are off your game at this time. You will need to put on a brave face. Keep a smile up. Even the fact that you have to shift your focus to smiling instead of withdrawing into yourself can help. Be present in the conversation that happens in the meeting and contribute to it. Ask questions and listen to what the others are saying. This can lead to positive interaction with others, which will be encouraging for you at this time. You will feel better about yourself if you are able to make a contribution to this event. There is nothing you can do about the argument with your partner right now, and thinking about it is only going to make you more unhappy. You have to think about the task at hand. Stoicism will never be an easy task. As humans, our first instinct is to think about how events affect us. We want to protest to unpleasant events and think about how unfair they are. However, this will not change what is happening. You might not want to accept what is happening, but it is here. Take the above example, for instance. It will take an effort to put your relationship troubles to the side in order to prioritize your meeting, but you must remind yourself why you need to do this. Your job needs to take absolute priority over anything else because this is going to be what keeps a roof over your head, food in your refrigerator. A relationship will not fulfill these needs. While it may be important, the things your livelihood depends on must come first. Also, think about this. Your relationship will definitely suffer if the argument you had leads to you having trouble with your job. It can be difficult to manage your emotions and keep yourself together, and that is why you need to make sure you are choosing a healthy method to do it. It is important to go over some of the more unhealthy coping mechanisms people commonly fall into, and how to avoid this. This is not to say anyone is bad for doing these things. However, it does mean that they are taking part in something that will be detrimental to their health if it continues, and it needs to stop. Before we go any further, I want to make a disclaimer that I am not trying to imply that alcohol itself is a bad thing. However, it is fair to say that it is a commonly abused substance when someone is trying to cope with stress, most likely because it is a depressant. When a person is under the influence of alcohol, they are not bothered by the things that would normally distress them. This means if they are experiencing stress, they will not have the same thought processes about it as when they are sober. Whenever a person is drunk, they say whatever is on their mind because they do not fear the consequences of their behavior. This creates a sense of numbness, which is something a person struggling with anxiety would understandably seek out. One of the problems with this means of stress relief is the fact that alcohol also has a tendency to amplify emotions a person is already feeling. This becomes a bad thing when they are already not in a good state of mind. They can become morose, and while they will express a lot of emotion, it will not have happened in any productive way, so nothing will have been resolved. In fact, when people are using alcohol as a crutch, they tend to damage their relationships while they are drunk. The negative emotions they suppress while they are sober are brought to the surface, causing them to become irritable. This is what creates a mean drunk. There comes a point of intoxication that it becomes virtually impossible to control what you say and how you act. If you want to have a drink in the evening, there is nothing wrong with that. However, if you are starting more and more days feeling ill, trying to piece the events of last night together, and feeling ashamed about the things you said, this is a sign that you need to pull back some. Stress can also cause a person to withdraw from the outside world. Little by little, everything starts to feel like too much work. Going outside of your house and into town feels overwhelming. It might feel too stressful to drive. You feel safer in your own home and feel an extreme aversion to leaving it. Enjoying your home isn't a bad thing, but being bound to it because it feels like the only safe place is. That is how agoraphobia starts to develop. That is why you cannot let too many days go by that you decide, I don't feel like it, when considering going out and doing things. Then it will become your go-to answer. You will start to think of different excuses for it, not feeling well, being tired, not having slept well, and more. Sleep is particularly affected by this. If you do not go out and do anything, you do not expend any energy. When this happens, it will cause you to be unable to sleep at night. As a result, you will be awake at absurd hours of the night. This will cause you to have to sleep until a very late hour of the morning, or even until the afternoon. However, you did not get quality sleep. You merely passed out after having been awake for too long. This means you will wake up feeling groggy and irritable. You will have slept most of the day away and still not feel like doing anything. You'll decide it's too late in the day to try to get anything started. You might promise yourself you are going to make a dramatic change tonight, get to bed early, wake up at the break of dawn tomorrow and conquer the world, knowing deep down that is not really going to happen. Notice that with all of these unhealthy coping mechanisms, there is one common theme. They are avoidance tactics. They are born of an unwillingness to face one's problems. This is why it is so important to come to a state of total acceptance about the circumstances we are dealt with. When we try to avoid thinking about them, we begin to engage in behaviors that will be harmful to us in order to dissociate from our own lives. When that happens, we are letting go of power over what happens in our lives. There are many problems in life that can be avoided by simply facing up to whatever the problem is. Think about any time you have known something was going to happen and were dreading it. Say you had failed a test or done some other type of thing you knew your parents would be upset about. The whole time you were hiding it, you were stressed to the high heavens about trying to keep the secret covered up. When they finally found out, was there a sense of relief even though you had gotten caught? At this point, the secret was out. There was no more dreading and hiding and lying. Everything was out in the open. The chips were going to fall wherever they would. Whoever was going to be angry would get angry. Whatever punishments you received would happen. It would now be in the rear view. A Stoic faces their problems head on. When you know exactly what you are dealing with, and all of the cards are on the table, you will then be able to figure out exactly what you are going to have to do to get out of this situation. You will find at this point that you are much less afraid of the future. This will make you feel in control and therefore at peace. Stoics should not be mistaken for being passive. They stand up for themselves. They just do it in a different way. They know how to pick their battles. They know that just because someone is trying to pick a fight doesn't mean they need to. People can easily recognize a person on the internet who is trying to start chaos and is baiting a potential victim. There is a multitude of words that are used to describe them, but this can also occur in real life. Imagine that kid who would sit behind someone and bother them, poke them repeatedly, keep whispering to them, and generally doing things for the sake of annoying the other student. Their end goal is to make that person lash out, at which point they will become meek and seemingly frightened. They will look sheepishly at the teacher, who will see the other student as being the aggressive one, and then they will be punished. You might feel like there is no such thing as making this person go away, but they will if you let them know you are not going to be any fun. It would be like talking to a wall trying to get a reply. They will eventually get bored. If you let things and people around you get to you, you will lose sight of your real personality because you are focusing on initial reactions. You have to sink deep into the art of placing yourself in the dominant position over these knee-jerk emotions. How to practice Stoicism. They say practice makes perfect. You can make the resolution that you are going to embrace Stoicism, but that is not the same as upholding it. There will times that it is very difficult to keep up the habit of Stoicism. Here are some ways you can practice staying in control of your emotions rather than them controlling you. Some of these techniques will be physical, while others will be psychological. This is because a calm emotional state depends on both of these factors. Don't underestimate the power of exercise. Not only is it good for your physical health, but it can release some unpleasant emotions. For example, many people have taken up kickboxing as a means of controlling their anger. The emotion is released, but not in a way that will be destructive. This leaves your mind feeling clear so you can go through the day as a calm and level-headed person. Another exercise you should give a try is yoga. It is a slower-paced method, but every bit as beneficial. All of the poses emphasize focus, balance, and breathing. All of these factors add up to an ability to relax. Many times, a yoga instructor will tell their students at the beginning of the class to get rid of thoughts of the outside world. This is because, in order to find relaxation, you need to simply put aside your worries for a little while. There is nothing you can do about them right now. This is partially why yoga poses are often ones that require concentration, such as balancing yourself on one leg. This forces you to shift your focus to properly executing the pose. You should also learn about meditation. This practice encourages mindfulness, which is essentially keeping your mind in the present. You are not lamenting about the past, which has already happened, or worrying about the future, which cannot be predicted. A successful person does not let their mind be plagued with unproductive and self-destructive thoughts such as, "What if something bad happens to someone I love and it's my fault?" Or, "I'm such an idiot for having done that." They think, "What can I do today to work toward my goals?" Throughout the day, we are bombarded with information, new responsibilities, changes in plans, inconveniences, and more. This can cause you to have thoughts racing around in your mind until we get stuck on one, such as, "How am I going to get all of this done?" The more your mind repeats it, the more intense the stress it causes will become. Think about how when a set of cords has been carried around in a bag for a long time, they become tangled up to the point where they are unusable. It takes you a little while to get them untangled, and in order to do that, you have to sit down with them for a little while with no distractions while you figure out exactly how to unwrap them. Meditation holds you into your own mind, which is something you will need to be able to do if you are going to stay true to yourself. One of the core aspects of being a Stoic is the fact that they hold fast to their values and do not change them just because someone else tells them to. This doesn't mean you can't listen to the other person's point of view. However, if there is nothing you stand for, your foundation will be brittle. Find something you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be the noblest cause in the world. Just get involved in something and believe strongly in it. Become active and mean it. You will be happier when you care about something and stand for it, because then you will feel a sense of purpose. This sense of purpose does not always have to be about the grand movements for things outside of us. It also applies to the smaller tasks that will only have an impact on us. Think about how you go through your day. Sometimes our days and even weeks go by as a blur because we have not stopped our engines long enough to register what is going on. This means we aren't putting proper care into what we do. If you find yourself hurrying too much, slow down a little. Do your daily activities more gradually, and effectively. Often, when we are doing things for other people, such as a project or other favor, we will take our time and make sure to do it right. However, when we are doing things for ourselves, we hurry. We choke down our lunch, wash our face as quickly as possible, hurry ourselves when we're at the front of a line, so we do not inconvenience anyone. It is most people's first instinct to try to get out of the way and not be a bother to anyone. When you do this, you are not living with virtue because you are not putting effort into the betterment of your life. You are worth the few more minutes it would take for you to finish your lunch at your leisure or make sure you have all of your belongings before you leave a place. Another core part of being a Stoic is making your time valuable. There are 24 hours in a day, and one thing everyone gets is the same amount of time every day. There are obligations we all have, school, work, and other things. Everyone also has free time, even if it is less than others. This time is filled up with something, and what you do with it is your choice. If you want to feel like your time has been well spent, you need to make that happen. You must create the circumstances you want for your life. If you just wish things could be different for you without actually doing anything to make that so, all you will ever have are wishes. Another thing, you should also consider having a person to coach you in managing your emotions. There are people who make a career out of it. They are known as therapists. Therapy is to be thought of as something crazy people do. This is not true. Actually, the people who act the most crazy are the ones who will not go to therapy because they refuse to deal with their problems. If you go to therapy, you are taking an active role in managing your emotions. If you do not wish to see a psychologist, there are online sources that you can speak to, such as blogs and articles written by life coaches. They will give you tools that you can keep in your back pocket for whenever you need to use them. You will be better off when you have these things because then you will have a plan of action for when life throws a challenge your way. Even though life is unpredictable, you can still be prepared for what could happen. Stoicism emphasizes preparing for the worst. This means you cannot pin all of your hopes on one outcome. You might prefer a certain one, but do not put yourself in a dangerous position where either this works out or you have no backup plan. Here is what I mean by this. Imagine you are just about to finish high school and are trying to get yourself set up for college next year. There might be one school in particular that you want to get into, and that is not a bad thing. It is perfectly fine to put all of the effort you can into that application and hope you are accepted. In fact, this would be living with arete because you are creating something that is as perfected as you can make it. However, it would not be wise to only apply to that school. If you did that and were not accepted, you would not be able to start college that year and all of your plans would be pushed back. Let's say you apply to others. You don't get into your dream school, but one of the other schools accepts you. It may not be exactly what you wanted, but your future is secure and a degree is valid, no matter what university you get it from. A Stoic accepts the fact that things will not always go the way they want it, and that they are not owed anything by the world. This is a part of lessening the importance one places on themselves. Some people develop a chip on their shoulder because they do not feel like they are as fortunate as other people. They are resentful and envious of what they have. They feel like things are handed to other people while they are denied. This makes them feel like they are entitled to things, that the world owes them compensation for the ways it has let them down. When this does not happen, they become even angrier and assume they are one of those people who do not get the same breaks as other people do. There are a few flaws in this thinking. First, it assumes that everything everyone else has is something that was handed to them. It ignores any struggles they might have had to overcome to achieve what they have. That is why this is self-centered thinking. It makes a sweeping generalization about the world. It also ignores the fact that if someone has succeeded in something, starting a business, finding a fulfilling relationship, having a social life, etc., they had to go out and work for that. These things did not just appear in their life. You do not get anything you do not work for. You are not owed anything for your past troubles or even because you have been kind and put the needs of others before your own. That is another flawed logic some people develop, that they will someday be rewarded for behaving in a self-sacrificing fashion. Unfortunately, no one is going to notice how good of a person you have been and how much you have given up and give you whatever you want for that. This type of thinking will only lead to disappointment and anger. The person you will become will not be a good one. Let's say you wish you could start a business. Find out what it takes to create one. Get a solid idea of what you would want to sell. Think about whether you are aiming for business to business, B2B, or business to customer, B2C. Talk to people about your idea. Ask them what they think is lacking in that field. This will help shape your idea of what to sell and how to sell it. Start creating an online presence. It is not an easy task, but it is possible. It will require a lot of work on your part, just like anyone else who has ever made it in the business world has had to do. The same idea applies to anything you want. You have to grab it with both hands. Forget about not having any familial ties that would help in this department, or any other advantages you don't have. That is beyond your control. Focus on what you bring to the table. Figure out what your strong points are and capitalize on them. Maybe you are creative. Maybe you have a charismatic personality. Everyone has a trait that is helpful for being successful in the business world. A helpful activity might be to take a personality test to see how you can use your particular type to your advantage. Now let's talk about how to simplify your life so you can be your most effective self. Stoics emphasize not keeping things you don't need. These things become clutter. It is easy to find yourself putting things away because you'll deal with them later. We often keep things for much longer than we should because of the sentimental value they once held, such as a gift from a close friend or a favorite childhood toy. We hold on to these possessions even as they start to look old and withered and nothing like they did when they were given to us. At some point, looking at these things does not even give you joy. It is sad to look at them because of how much they have deteriorated, but you still have them because you feel an obligation to keep them. You might feel like you are not being appreciative of the gift if you throw it away now. Keeping things that have seen their better days out of a sense of guilt will cause internal suffering. Try thinking about the spirit this gift was given to you in. Say you had a teddy bear your parents gave you as a child. You loved it while it was new and you were young, but now you're an adult. You don't play with teddy bears anymore, and yet you're still keeping this one. It's old and dingy now, pieces of it are missing, and there are other obvious wear and tear. This is not the same toy your parents bought for you all those years ago. If they first saw it the way it is now, they would not have gotten it. They saw the cute and fluffy toy it once was and wanted you to have it so it could be a fond memory for your childhood. It's like a Christmas card. You give that to someone because you want to wish them happy holidays for that particular year. You would not want it to become something they feel beholden to years later, even though it's just taking up space and contributing to the clutter in their life. Material things are meant to come and go. They are in their best shape when you first get them. No matter how gently you handle them, they are still going to take damage over time. After a while, it will be time to get rid of them. After you have used it for what it was intended for, all it is doing now is collecting dust. It is not a sign of you being ungrateful or lessening the bond between you and your friend by throwing something away that was from them. You still care about them just as much. You have your memories of this possession, and the two of you will exchange more gifts in the future. When you feel like you have to keep something even though you want to get rid of it, you will feel depressed when you look at it. That's not something a truly treasured item would do for you. It would make you feel good, and you would proudly put it on display for anyone who comes to your house to see. You would want to be asked about it so you could talk about it. If you cringe at the thought of it, it is not bringing any value to your life. You do not owe it to anybody to keep something that is just getting in the way, adding clutter to your life, and depresses you. No real friend would ask that of you. When talking about clothing and other aesthetic items, if you have not used or worn it in over 6 months, you probably aren't going to. It is not a good idea to hold on to items with the thought of, someday I'll want to use it again. If you feel like a friend would want you to keep it, you might be dabbling in the dangerous art of people-pleasing. People-pleasing is a pattern of behavior you must get out of if you are to become happy. On the surface, being a people-pleaser might seem like a noble thing. However, when you delve deeper into the psychology of a person with this trait, it is no less selfish than any other manipulative tactic. This might seem like a harsh analysis of this behavior, but everything that everyone does comes with some form of gain. When you think about what is going in a person's mind when they agree with everything a person says and tries to completely accommodate them, there is self-interest involved. They want this person to like them and perceive them as a good person, even if their words and actions are not aligned with how they truly feel. That is why it is being referred to as a manipulative tactic. This is not to say that a person who does it is evil. Everyone has manipulative tendencies in their own way. However, right now, we're talking about people-pleasing in particular, and how it will harm you and others. When you try to please everyone, you end up not having an authentic self. You behave in a certain way around everyone to make them happy. Sometimes people who do this are not sure why they still have a hard time making and keeping friends, even though they often go out of their way for people. For one, people can tell when someone is being insincere about who they are. It is unsettling because they know they are being fooled and cannot figure out what angle the person is coming from. Think about when a person gives you a fake smile. It probably does not create feelings of warmth. You might even feel a little frightened because you are trying to figure out what is really going on in their mind. In order to become a people pleaser, you will have to have an extremely distant relationship with the truth. This is because when you are trying to please everyone and not make any waves, you will have to tell people lies in order to save face. For example, someone asks you if their shirt and pants clash. You think so, but you force a smile and tell them it looks fine. This means you have not truly advised them, but told them what you think they want to hear. The other big reason people-pleasing is a manipulative tactic is that everything a person does under this mentality is working towards an end goal. They are looking to gain something at the end of it. Thinking of it this way, it may be true that they are always there for others in their time of need, tell them what they want to hear, and listen to their problems. But they are doing all of this because they want something from the person. In the end, if the plan fails and they do not get the companionship and closeness they feel they deserve, they will become resentful and angry. They have the ability to change their mind about someone very quickly. A person can be extremely important to them 1 minute and written off as just like all the others in the next. Do not obsess over trying not to say the wrong thing in social interactions. You have to accept that at some point you are going to say the wrong thing. Everyone says awkward things at times. At this point, you just need to shrug it off and change the subject. You cannot let every mistake you make cause you pain. You will not be able to function in this world if you do that. You cannot predict what people are going to receive well. Also, make sure you are interpreting their reaction correctly. Cognitive distortions can sometimes lead us to interpret events and actions of the people around us in incorrect ways. When you have this going on, it can cause you to assume what everyone says to you is a negative thing. This will make you feel like you always need to defend yourself, and like you have done something wrong. You will never be able to reach your highest self if you are plagued by self-doubt. You do not make good decisions when you live in a state of being unsure of yourself. It will cause you to be indecisive. This means you will never make a decision with confidence because you will then be going over it and wonder if you did the wrong thing. Your social interactions will be very difficult because when you are telling yourself over and over not to make a mistake, you will be nervous, and it will show. Other people will be able to tell when you are nervous, and this will be off-putting. This is because it will cause them to feel nervous because they will feel just as unsafe to speak freely as you are. You will need to learn to back yourself up in your decisions. When you are faced with a decision, both options will have pros and cons, but you will need to choose one and feel good about it, even if there are ways in which the other one would have been better. Start out with a simple, no-risk decision. You are at the movies and trying to figure out which one to see. One of them has an actor you really like in the cast list, but you've heard some negative reviews about the movie itself. The other one doesn't have anyone familiar in it, but you've heard some very positive things about it. This means there is no such thing as a perfect choice. You might wish you had made the other decision later, but that will not be the worst thing that could ever happen. There is no such thing as living a life completely free of regrets. You have to figure out which benefit means more to you and which downside you could live with, and then once you have come to that decision, you need to be confident in the fact that you did the right thing. You will not be able to be successful if you can never get behind yourself. This means you need to silence the voice in your head that says, "What if I did the wrong thing?" and "Maybe I should have done something else." This will make it nearly impossible to keep your emotions in check. When you do this, you are causing yourself undue stress. Make this rule with yourself. Doubts about whether this is the right thing to do should be reserved for before you have made it. After you have committed to do it and gone through with the actions, all of that needs to come to an end. This is because once the deed has been done, it becomes a part of the past and therefore is no longer something you can control. This means you need to shift your focus to making the most of your current circumstances. You will hurt yourself if you cannot do this. You have to understand that being indecisive does not mean you will never have to make a decision. It just means that they will all be made for you by outside forces. Remember that you still make a choice even when you choose to be indecisive. Imagine that someone is asking if anyone wants a candy bar and that they have 5 of them, and whoever asks for them first will be the ones to get them. If you wait to figure out if you should ask for one, it will eventually be too late because the last one will have been given away. You still made a decision in that situation, to wait until the outcome of it was out of your hands. Think of a Stoic person you admire. They do not even have to subscribe to the philosophy of Stoicism. However, their personality lends itself to it. They are able to keep themselves in check even in distressing times. They know how to de-escalate conflict. They are able to work under deadlines without becoming too distressed. They always come prepared, and if there is a setback, they know how to roll with the punches and come up with a solution using whatever you have. Being resourceful is a part of having fortitude. You may not have the ideal circumstances and tools, but you can still think of ways to bide your time. For example, a resourceful person might realize they have been spending a little too much money, or have just gotten a big bill that means they do not have a lot of money to go out to eat this week. Instead of panicking about what they are going to do, they go to the kitchen to see what they are going to come up with. In almost any kitchen, there are enough ingredients to come up with some sort of meal. They realize they have some noodles, tomatoes, salt, and pepper. This means they can have simple spaghetti. It may not be their ideal meal, but it will be substantial for the time being. This is how a person with fortitude thinks. They do not dwell on how unfortunate their circumstance is or how it is unfair that it is happening. They think about what is available to them to get the job done. Being envious of what other people have and feeling cheated out of things will get you nowhere in life. You will just continue to become more and more frustrated. This is what happens when remains in a state of feeling sorry for themselves and counts all of the ways in which they have been wrong. A person who does this has the erroneous belief that their set of unfortunate circumstances are a special case and that no one else feels like they do. Whatever the situation is, there are other cases like it. This is not to be diminishing, but comforting. Whatever obstacles you are facing in your life, it is not something that has not been experienced before by many other people. If they can navigate through it, you can as well. A Stoic knows when they need to make tough decisions and how to make the right one. They make them using their mind as opposed to their heart. Sometimes, when our decisions come from our heart, we can behave illogically. We will do things that are not good for us because of something we feel an attachment to. A common example of this is when people insist on holding on to a relationship that is not good for them. They are not truly compatible, and they cannot figure out a way to communicate in a healthy fashion. They might have even broken up before. Usually it has happened several times. But then they start sifting through their fond memories of the person, and they reconnect with them. By the time this cycle has repeated itself several times, the two people have gotten into a vicious cycle. They have too much history between them, and therefore, all they know how to do is to revert back to the behaviors that caused them to fall apart in the first place. Sometimes people who have engaged in this cycle can even end up romanticizing this pattern in their relationship. They rationalize that because they have been through so much together, they share a love that is more than everyone else's. They might even see it as an epic story comparable to the most famous romance books and movies. This is a product of thinking emotionally and not logically, because a person looking at this situation from a logical standpoint could clearly see that this is a toxic situation and one that both parties desperately need to talk away from. In Stoicism, self-preservation and maintaining your core values must take precedence over affairs of the heart. Ending this relationship might cause you pain, but it will be temporary. As you move on, this aching will subside. You will have the prospect of finding a new, more healthy relationship, and at the very least, you have gotten something out of your life that was damaging your spirit. You might even begin to realize over time that you were not holding on to that relationship for the reasons you thought you were. As humans, we can confuse habit or the desire not to be alone for love. This person feels like a safe place to go to. However, when you think about it, that is not true. Nothing that is the source of such inner turmoil is safe. You might think letting go of this relationship would be too painful, but think about the long-term suffering you have been through because of it. A situation like this is always unstable. When you feel like your romantic relationship is hanging in the balance, you will naturally feel an extreme level of anxiety. When this type of thing is going on, you will be in a constant state where your stress level is through the roof, which over time will do great damage to your physical and mental health. Keep in mind that you can have fond memories of something without keeping it. It is like when you get rid of a jacket you loved when you were a child. You will always remember how fond you were of it, but now it has turned into something that doesn't fit anymore and has become old and withered. It was a good thing back in your childhood, but now it has gone bad. The same thing can happen with relationships. It does not even have to mean that either people are bad. However, it does mean that they are bad for one another. Sometimes in our society, emotional pain can be inadvertently romanticized. Think about how in TV shows, movies, and books, the most turbulent and unstable relationship is portrayed as the most beautiful one. There is a narrative that no matter what happens, they are always drawn back to one another, which means they are meant to be together. At the end of the story, they will come together for good, and all will be well. All of their deep-seated issues will suddenly be resolved and never heard from again, and they will morph into a healthy couple presumably from now on. This will not happen. The issues that have made a relationship toxic in the past will continue to without extreme levels of intervention from a therapist. There is nothing beautiful about causing oneself undue emotional pain that takes away from living with virtue. When you are giving all of your energy to something that refuses to work, you spend all of your time looking at your phone, arguing with that person, trying to make up with them, and all the while feeling worse about yourself while neglecting all aspects of your health. Emotional suffering will come at the expense of our performance at work. We will be unable to concentrate on anything that is not the source of our stress. At some point, you need to be able to say, "This is taking everything I have and giving me nothing in return." A person who refuses to back down from something that has no hope is not strong. A person who is willing to do what is good for them, even if it hurts for a little while, is truly the strong one. How to deal with yourself when life gets tough. Let's face it. Sometimes life is not easy. There are days when you can't catch a break. Sometimes these days cannot be prevented because you will be hit with something that is beyond your control. You are let go from your job. Your significant other breaks up with you. You have an argument with a close friend. You have a fender bender while driving home. Whatever the circumstance is, it has jostled your emotions. If you sink into this, you are at risk of doing something you will regret later. This is why it is so important not to let yourself get worked up to the point where you can no longer control your emotions. The first thing you need to do is stop for a moment. Whatever you are doing, drop it just for a little while. If you are talking to someone else, and this is the source of your distress, you definitely need to stop the conversation for a little while. You might think you need to have the argument out now, but you are upset, and so are they. The only thing that will happen is that the two of you will become more upset with each other. Just step away from the situation. Do something that calms you down. Go for a run. Listen to music. Write in your journal. Call a friend or family member who you can trust to keep your secrets and vent to them. Let your initial impulses come and go until you can think rationally about the situation. A common practice among Stoics is to brace themselves for the worst-case scenario. The goal in this is not to be pessimistic. It is to be prepared. When you have accepted the worst things that can happen, you will be able to deal with them and operate under those circumstances. I'm going to drag a theater motto into this. The show must go on. When you're putting on a performance, things are going to go wrong. No matter how many times you rehearsed, no matter how much the crew has poured over the lights and setting, there are going to be mistakes made. Even Broadway performances that have turned into well-oiled machines suffer these kinds of mishaps. Someone will forget a line. A prop will be dropped. A setting transition will be a little too early or late. Miscommunications will happen among the sound technicians. However, there is no time to stop and lament about the mistake. This will only cause more mistakes to happen, and then it will be apparent to the audience that this play was not well prepared. Instead, the cast and crew are to improvise in these circumstances. A Stoic does not sink into stress. This is a difficult thing to avoid, especially if you are a person who is more prone to the sensation of anxiety. It might feel like you will not be able to overcome this feeling. When you are feeling overcome by stress, ground yourself. Part of accepting your current circumstances is to not burden yourself with more than what is really happening. This means don't worry about things that haven't happened yet. If your boss hasn't called your performance into question, do not worry about them firing you. If all seems to be going well in your romantic relationship and they haven't said anything that would hint at breaking up with you, trust that it is secure. To make a long story short, don't borrow trouble and create problems for yourself. This takes time away from doing something about the ones you actually have. A psychological technique that is often used when someone is becoming too emotional is known as mindful grounding. This means you ground yourself into the present whenever you are worried about the past or future. If your focus is on either of those timelines, you are not being mindful, and you are wasting time. To alleviate this, you pull yourself back into the present by focusing on what is happening in the real world. This is done by turning your attention to whatever is around you. Use your senses. If you see a painting in the room, focus on its different colors and patterns. If there is something playing on the television or radio, listen in. Reach out for an object in your vicinities, such as a pencil, decoration, or even your shirt sleeve, and touch it. There is also something to faking it until you make it. If you let yourself become consumed by distressing feelings, they are only going to become stronger. If you are going through a time where you are feeling down, you are not going to want to dedicate yourself to self-care, but this is the time where it is the most important. Sometimes you will need to just get up and do something even though you are not feeling the motivation to do it. Spending your time alone in your room, not seeing anyone or putting any effort into your appearance or physical health, is going to make your life feel bleaker as this goes on longer. If you are feeling down about yourself, take a shower or bath. Get dressed, put on makeup if you choose to do so, and generally do the things that make you feel like you look good. You've probably heard the idea that if you look good, you will feel good, and there is truth to it. If you go out somewhere after rolling out of bed and not putting effort into your appearance, you will subconsciously act more timid. Even if someone is interested in talking to you, you will likely avoid them because you are convinced they are starting at a flaw of yours. You will want to just run your errands and get back home, hoping no one notices you. However, when you have dressed up, you will go out putting your best foot forward. You will be comfortable talking to people. In fact, you will probably be bolder than usual. You will show people more of your true personality, and therefore establish a stronger connection. You are also living with irate when you do this. You have put time and effort into creating something. In this case, it is your look, which is important in today's world. When you go to an interview for a job, the way you look and present yourself will matter, and advancing in your career is essential to living with virtue. Next, we're going to talk about stress management. Stress is a common problem for people right now. The fact is that we are juggling more things than we have in the past. For example, work and school have been changed by the internet. While you have access to more information, it also makes for more things you need to keep track of. Many people have multiple work phones, and this means they have to keep up with all of their notifications, and in addition, they have to keep an eye out for emails, social media messages, and more. On top of that, there are family responsibilities and anything else a person is involved in. Many people are finding it difficult to stay on top of things and spend a great deal of time wondering how they are going to finish all of their tasks for the day. All of this points to the fact that you must have a means of stress relief, or you are not going to be able to keep it in check, and therefore your emotions will spiral out of control. You need to set a time that you are going to think about the things that are bothering you. Once that time is up, you have got to hold yourself to putting all of your worries away. When you continue to feed your anxiety about something, not only are you not actually doing anything about the problem, but you are putting both your physical and mental health at risk. Stress that is prolonged increases in intensity. If it is not alleviated, it can cause you to have a nervous breakdown. You definitely will not make the best judgment calls when you are in this state of mind. It can escalate to panic attacks. When you are experiencing anxiety, your heart rate increases dramatically. Over time, this will cause problems with your blood pressure. Some people have even had heart attacks due to stress. It is easier to manage the problem before it gets to that point than to try to relieve it once you are there. This is why you need to learn to relax and also be able to recognize when you are at your limit and need to take some time to focus solely on your mental health, otherwise known as a mental health day. You've probably heard of these before, and they are actually quite helpful. If you are feeling burned out, putting more pressure on yourself isn't going to do you any favors. Think about how, when your phone's battery runs out, there is nothing more it will be able to do until you put it on the charger. Humans need to recharge. There's only so long that you can run on fumes and keep going. It is a lesson in self-preservation and survivability to learn when you have reached your limit. There are some subtle signs to watch out for before it gets to the point where you're in danger of a breakdown. For one, you're more irritable than usual. Your interactions with people have gotten more confrontational, and you are quick to take things others say as an insult. Stress also causes people to cry more easily. Emotional distress can also manifest through physical symptoms. In particular, you will feel fatigued and taking a nap doesn't help. Stress is tiring on the body because it causes many of its organs to overfunction. When you read through these symptoms and relate to them, you are in desperate need of a mental health day. Make a plan to do it this weekend. The first thing you need to do is unplug. Make yourself unavailable by phone and other media. This way, you have no risk of any drama starting with anyone. After that, there really is no right or wrong way to go about this day. It will start to become intuitive. Your mind and body will tell you what you need. Only think about helping your present self. One of the most painful and unhelpful things to do for your psyche is to wish for things to be different that have already happened. This is going to be a difficult habit to let go of because we are creatures who want what we want. It begins early in life. As children, we get upset about not having won some contest. As we get older, we have to deal with bigger disappointments, such as someone we have a crush on choosing someone else and another person being picked for a job we wanted. It is easy to feel defeated about these types of disappointments, and like they would not have happened if there wasn't something wrong with you. However, this is a form of personalizing something that should be taken with a grain of salt. Sometimes someone will not return the feelings you have for them. If you are turned down for a job, they just have a different personality or skill set in mind. It is not out of personal feelings against you. Sometimes you will want to be a part of a group of friends, and it doesn't work out. It might not even be that they dislike you. You could just not click with them. You are two different people, and so you are not a good fit for them. Someone not wanting to be friends with you does not mean you are unlikable. It just means you are looking in the wrong places for friends. Try finding people whose interests are more aligned with yours. We've talked about needing to take responsibility for your actions. No matter how good we try to be, there will still be times where we do something wrong. You will never go through life without doing things that wrong people, and often we cause the most pain when we are trying to not to upset anyone. You are going to hurt someone's feelings at some point, and when you do this, you need to learn to apologize. This is one of the hardest things for anyone to do. We want to think of ourselves as good people, and when we have to admit we have done something hurtful to someone else, that goes against this belief. There is also the natural human instinct to self-protect. It does not make you a bad person. Everyone wants to be the good guy in disagreements. However, you will have to move past this if you want to preserve relationships and live with integrity. When we do something wrong, we need to apologize to the person whose feelings we have damaged. There is a right and wrong way to apologize, and it is not about the exact verbiage. It is about the spirit in which you give it. For one, do not give a non-apology. When you are trying to express regret for hurting someone is not the time to voice a grievance you have about them or defend yourself. What I mean when I say a non-apology is one where the ultimate goal is to defend oneself. This could mean shuffling the blame onto the other person, for example, acknowledging you did something wrong but then going on to say it was provoked by them. The best way to avoid doing this is by never, under any circumstances, letting yourself say the words, "I'm sorry, but..." There is a saying that claims that every word before the word, but, it cancelled out by that word. It might come off to the other person like you were only saying that as required etiquette but do not really feel it. It is best to make the apology short and succinct. Even though your first impulse might be to try to make a speech, if you do this, you will come off as rambling. It might also seem like you are trying to put the focus on you. Just state what you are sorry for. It means more than you might think to a person when you explicitly say what you have done. It not only lets it be known that you know what you did that was wrong, but it also shows that you are willing to own up to it. It makes the apology feel more sincere than if you talk vaguely about it. It will also give you a sense of feeling like the bandage has been ripped off. You will be able to move on from this incident. Admit it was wrong to do. Say something that has the effect of, "I know I behaved badly there." However you word it, you are admitting that was not your finest moment, and this will be validating for them. One of the most difficult things for people to deal with is feeling like they did not get closure, or that someone who has done something wrong to them does not feel remorse about it. They will not even be as upset about the act itself as they will about the lack of remorse. Your character will be improved in their eyes when you take responsibility for whatever it is that you have done, while you need to admit when you have done wrong. There is a caveat. Make this point briefly and then move on. Do not grovel about this fact or say something like, "I'm such a horrible friend." You might think it is expressing deep regret, or that saying bad things about yourself if a part of taking responsibility. But if you do too much flagellating yourself, it will seem like a manipulative tactic. When someone is doing this, it sets off an instinct in others to ease their pain. This means they will need to be giving comfort to someone else while they are the ones whose feelings need to be tended to. Stoicism means knowing how to deal when things do not go your way, knowing that the longer you spend lamenting about the disappointment, the longer you will put off doing something to improve your situation. Mourning for what you have lost must come to an end. What has been lost is now in the past, and you need to think about what you have in the present. We talked earlier about sending a job application and having it denied. This is understandably upsetting, but you must pull yourself together and send out another application. That is the only way you are going to be hired by anyone. You can be angry about what happened, insist that the company made a mistake and be kicked down by this. But by the end of all of that you will still need a job. You have to find a way to become hopeful again as you continue your job hunt. When you send your resume to another company, think of this as another opportunity. The possibility of being hired has come about again. The more you send out, the more you increase your chances of being called back. This is how you can pull yourself out of an unpleasant situation and create your own outcomes. Another thing that will help you is to ask someone who has been in the workforce for a long time to look at your resume and give you advice on how to make it better. This might feel a little daunting and even embarrassing because when you do this, they will have suggestions and constructive criticisms to give you. This means you will need to humble yourself enough to open yourself up to this. This does not mean that you are admitting to being bad at writing a resume. It means you are invested enough in it that you will call in someone with more experience to guide you. You cannot afford to be prideful in this situation. No one comes out of the gate knowing everything, and candidates who were proceeded with instead of you are not inherently better than you. For all you know, this was the 100th application they had sent, and every other time before that they had been rejected. They'd had to craft and revise the way they presented themselves to potential employers. The first time you go to an interview will not be your best performance. For one, it will be a new experience, so you will be nervous. You will not have your plan of how to portray yourself fully rounded out. In fact, for most people, their first try is a debacle. If this is the way it happens for you, do not become discouraged or feel ashamed of yourself. Just figure out what you can do better next time and congratulate yourself for having that first experience being interviewed. Each time this happens, you will learn something new. Eventually, you will no longer be nervous about it because you will have become used to this process. You will also have a better idea of what to do. You will speak more confidently and learn how to give quick and thoughtful answers to questions that you cannot predict. If you are sending in applications each and every day, going to interviews, and putting all of your effort into it, you are going to get results. The idea that there are people the world favors and ones that nothing ever works out for is false. This is self-defeating thought that causes people to take their hands off the reins in their own life. Another common misconception about life is that strength is about who can do the most vicious things. A person who has an unpleasant disposition and is easily annoyed will always say that life is difficult and that you need to be the one who strikes first before they get you. What they do not realize is that they create a lot of their own problems with their confrontational attitude. They make their own life difficult because they turn every interaction they have with another person into a fight. Because they do this, they are constantly having to fight, not realizing they would not have to do this if they did not approach others in a confrontational manner. This is also not the way to handle it when someone does want to start a conflict with you. In fact, that is what we will talk about in our final chapter. How to handle yourself when other people challenge you. It is an uncomfortable thing when you feel like you are being singled out. You will look at other people not currently being treated this way by this person and think it must be something that has only happened to you. However, this is a false assumption. If someone is rude to you, it is not only you that they have done this to. Everyone struggles with conflict sometimes. We might avoid it or get into it too much, and the latter is just as unhealthy as the former. Having conflicts with others is a part of being human. In fact, a certain amount of it can be productive. When we have disagreements, it gives everyone a chance to tell their side of the story. It is how differences in opinions are smoothed out and compromises are made. However, there is a healthy and unhealthy way to go about it. Conflict becomes unhealthy when the participants stop prioritizing coming to a solution and start attacking one another's character. Remember why you are having this conversation with this person. It is not because you dislike them and wish to hurt them. It is because you want to preserve the relationship and therefore reach an agreement. This is when conflict brings a relationship closer, when both people see the perspectives of one another and act in a way that meets the needs of both people. This does not mean everyone will get everything they want all the time. It means both people are being considered in the solution instead of one person completely conceding. One of the things you should not say when you are having a conflict with someone is something to the effect of, "You always," or "You never." This particularly happens when people are having conflicts with their significant others. A frustrated spouse might say, "You never wash the dishes," or "You're always on your phone while I'm trying to talk to you." Even if you have a legitimate gripe and the other person does often do what you are accusing them of, if you word your complaint this way, you will not get the results you want. This is because you did not voice it in a way that they can receive it. They will hear the "always" or "never" part and feel like they are being attacked, and they actually are when this is the approach. When a person is being attacked, they are inevitably going to defend themselves. Their first instinct might be to point out something you do that annoys them, which leads to a completely non-productive conflict where the participants are just throwing darts at one another without hearing what one another is saying. One of the most common reasons people give for a relationship not working out is that they did not feel like they were being heard. If you want someone to receive your complaint, You need to be direct but not unnecessarily harsh. Here's what I mean by that. You want to tell them what behavior bothers you, no more, no less. It often helps to put a buffer of sorts in there. For example, you might say, "It hurts my feelings when you use your phone while I'm talking to you." Then, you are making it clear that you do not dislike them as a person. When you word it in a way like this, you are talking about the problem and not them. So what do you do if you tell someone something they have done has hurt you and they do not listen? First, there is nothing you can do to change their mindset on that. You need to evaluate this relationship and ask yourself why you are investing time and energy into someone who has shown that they won't invest in you. We've discussed dealing with people who are willing to work with you towards bettering the relationship. Now we're going to talk about dealing with those who do not have this type of concern for others. You are going to come across people in your life who will try to get a rise out of you. They enjoy chaos and create it if they need to. They push the buttons of others trying to get a reaction out of you, and so if you give one to them, they will zero in on you. A person like this will use insults, sarcastic comments, controversial questions, or whatever else they need in order to start a conflict with or between people. When you get into an argument with someone like this, there is no winning it because they just like the conflict. They will purposefully say things they know will make you angry. Often this comes in the form of political and social debates, or other issues that are notorious for making tempers flare up. They will work at getting you angry, and then when they do, they will flip a switch. They will then get to be seen as the calm and collected one, while you are portrayed as the irrational one. They might even say something like, "Who's the one raising their voice?" To avoid falling into this trap, recognize when this is happening to you as opposed to getting angry about it, and reacting based on that. If someone is acting like this, it is absolutely futile to try to have a real relationship with them, and I will tell you why that is. In life, you are going to deal with people who have personality disorders. In fact, you probably already have met at least one person with one. A particular disorder that has been the subject of a lot of discussions lately is NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder. It was named after the Greek mythology character Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection. For a long time, when people heard the word narcissist, they thought of someone who spends too much time in front of the mirror and takes a large number of pictures of themselves. While a person with this disorder might exhibit those signs, the disorder runs much deeper than that. A narcissist is obsessed with themselves. That is the only person they can really take into equation. Even if they care about another person, they still see them as an extension of themselves and, therefore, will want to control their behavior. Here are some signs in how to spot a narcissist. Love bombing. In the beginning, you are the most important person in the world. They always have time for you and listen to your every word. It's difficult to see this at first because when a person is truly infatuated, they can mimic these signs. A subtle difference to catch on to is that when they are love bombing you, nothing else is going on in their lives. Manipulation. They are always coming from an angle. Gaslighting. This is more easy to detect in yourself than in their behavior. You will feel like you're going crazy and like you're incompetent. This comes as a result of them telling you an event you remember clearly didn't happen, or not in the way you think it did. Using Stoicism to defend against manipulation of a narcissist will come in handy. It means you will not let their words and actions change your view of yourself. They might try to rewrite history for you, but you can stay confident in your memory. You don't need them to admit to something you know they've done. The best thing you can do is know you are in the right and leave the situation. Anyone who gets into the inner circle of a narcissist will be subjected to abuse. Even people they have loose interpersonal relationships with, such as coworkers or classmates, will be the target of their narcissistic traits. As you navigate through your professional life, you will need to learn how to deal with a narcissist, because the disorder will more likely than not show up in your work environment. Stoicism can be employed to have the most successful possible relationship with them as possible. The psychological field has actually already brought Stoicism into the discussion of how to deal with narcissists and other malignant personality disorders with a technique known as gray rocking. It gets its name from how you behave using this tactic. You become as dull and uninteresting as a gray rock. Narcissists are looking for an argument. They want to make you become emotional. When the other person is trying to draw you into an argument, you do not respond to their statements, no matter how inflammatory they are. You stick to what you need to talk to them about and end the conversation once you have talked about the necessary things. There is one thing you need to remember about individuals with personality disorders. Your conversations with them will always be circular if you allow them to pull you into that. This is sometimes referred to as word salad. This tactic is meant to confuse and frustrate you. If you let them, a narcissist will jerk you around all over the place in a conversation. This is why you need to hold your ground. Trying to get them to see your point of view and compromise is futile. By the time a person has developed NPD, they will be incapable of having empathy for you. The only thing you can do is practice self-preservation. If you are reading through this and finding a lot of these signs, remind you of someone you know. Your only option for your well-being is to distance yourself from this person. When you practice Stoicism in this situation, you recognize that not every relationship you form is one you will get to keep forever. In fact, there are very few interpersonal relationships that will last throughout your life. Most of the time, these will be familial ties. Friends come and go, and that is a natural part of life. It isn't a failure on your part if a friendship or other relationship doesn't work out. Sometimes relationships were good at one time, but now they have gone sour. Do not use the former good times as a reason to stay in a situation that is hurting your spirit. You can take the positive with you and leave the negative behind. A Stoic also picks their battles. You do not need to justify yourself to everyone. Sometimes people will ask you to explain yourself when it isn't warranted. For example, someone asks you why you are wearing a certain combination of outfit and shoes. You do not owe it to them to struggle to come up with an explanation that will satisfy them. The fact that they do not agree with your fashion choices does not mean you need to change your look. This is also where standing your ground comes in. People with manipulative personalities can spot an easy target, meaning people who do not have strong beliefs and the self-esteem required to have them. For your sake, you need to keep from giving the impression of yourself as being too agreeable and willing to compromise yourself for someone else, meaning you will go back on how you expect to be treated to have them in your life. So you want the people in your life to not call you names. If you have a friend who is doing this to you, they are not holding up to your standards. At this point, you will need to stand your ground and keep your expectations where they should be. This means holding on to the belief that you should not be called names. Another problem that will come for everyone at least once in their life is a smear campaign. We've talked about narcissists and their tactics while you're in their inner circle. A smear campaign is something they often do when you leave or challenge them. This is when they aim to destroy a person's reputation by spreading lies and rumors about them. A common angle they go for is to get everyone to think they are crazy. If they manage this, what that person says about them is not credible. This is one of the scariest things that can happen to you because you feel like everyone is turning against you. Your impulse might be to try and defend yourself by telling your side of the story. You might even feel tempted to retaliate by telling others things you know about that person. However, when you do that, you're doing exactly what they wanted you to do. Their goal is to launch an attack on your character. If you behave in a way that confirms what they are saying about you, then they win. The best thing to do when you are being hit with a smear campaign is to not act. You are not taking it lying down when you do this. You are turning the tables on them. They launch this campaign to make others question your sanity or character. People will grow tired of hearing them talk about you, and if you do not respond to their comments, it will be you that comes off as the rational one. Meanwhile, they will be the one who seems vindictive and is rambling on about something that does not come with any proof. Remember this. What one person says about you is not what everyone else thinks about you. Being the one talking the loudest does not mean being the majority. Another thing you will need to be prepared for when you are disentangling yourself from a narcissist is using threats of self-harm or suicide to manipulate you. This is a very sinister practice because we've been taught to always take these sorts of claims seriously. And make no mistake about it, a narcissist is using that fact against you. If you are trying to ignore the person and they are messaging you incessantly, they will likely eventually use this tactic. So you need to be prepared for this. These threats are meant to take advantage of your emotions so you will respond to them. You might even think, I'm upset with them, but I don't want them to die, and I would never forgive myself if they actually went through with it. Stop right there if you are having thoughts like these because it means their manipulation is working. Put the emotional response to what they are saying aside for a moment, and scroll back up a few messages. They were most likely insults, which were shortly preceded by begging for you to reply and promising things will be different from now on. Those two behaviors were tactics. This one is no different. For this, we need to backtrack to the point that you are not responsible for what someone else says or does. When someone is using threats of self-harm to manipulate you, you have to keep this in mind. If you feel like they might truly hurt themselves, you can contact authorities who can do something about it. But that needs to be the end of what you do. To hold that over your head as a means of controlling you is a form of bullying, which is a behavior that needs more discussion in adulthood. We've all had bullies. The behavior starts early in school. However, it is a widely held and false belief that it ends in school. In the workplace and all throughout your life, there will be times where someone decides for whatever reason that they want to single you out to persecute. The first thing you need to realize is that this is not your fault that they are doing this to you. Bullies have a compulsion to harass people. In the end, picking you as a target was fairly random for them. If you were not there, they would be doing it to someone else. You have to learn how not to be a doormat to others. I would never claim that someone brings bullying and persecution onto themselves. However, there are ways you can behave that can negate this. There are also ways to make an already inflammatory situation worse. For one, do not lose your cool around this person. If they know they can push your buttons, they will remember this. When you are standing up for yourself, you need to be authoritative. If you sound like you are begging or pleading, this person will know they have the upper hand. On the other hand, you do not want to be completely confrontational. The reason for this is that they might use this as leverage against you. For one, you are losing it like they want you to. This could also be evidence they use to paint you as the one who started it. At this point, you are being baited, and while your words and actions might just be the product of the heat of the moment, you will still be held accountable. Let them know in an even tone that their opinion of you is of no consequence. As a Stoic, you need to look at the situation from an objective point of view. Ask yourself, what will I gain if I respond to this? This person is not worth it. Even if they think something of you for not responding, even if they tell people you are weak or cowardly, so what? Why should you care what some random people think about you? Your ability to go through life with your sanity intact will depend on your ability to ignore things other people will say about you. You are not the only person people talk about. It happens to everyone. People gossip when they have nothing better to do. Sometimes they will gossip and spread rumors about someone they have never even met before. If you refuse to engage in a destructive conversation, you come out the more powerful one. One of the most important things you need to learn is that you will never have everyone's approval. No matter what decisions you make, there will be someone with something negative to say about it. This does not mean you have made a bad decision. The truth is that people have a tendency to make judgments about a situation without knowing all of the facts about it. This is not to speak ill of people. However, the fact remains that everyone is guilty of this. Sometimes we speak from our own experience and project that onto another person's situation, even if the two are not the same. For example, someone comes to their friend for advice about possibly entering a new relationship with someone they had dated before. Their friend immediately shuts down the idea and forbids them to do it. This comes from their own experience because they tried that once and it did not work out. This person is not being a good friend because they are using this time that is supposed to be about someone else to vent about their own problems. When you think about it this way, they are not commenting on your situation at all because they never shifted the focus away from theirs. This is why you should not change your decision based on this. You should never make a decision you do not want to just because of what someone else says. You can take their advice into consideration and see that they may have some points. However, if you immediately change your course because someone says you need to, you will always be running around in circles. You not doing something someone wants you to do is not you showing them a lack of respect. It also does not mean you did not listen to them. I said before that you have to learn to stand your ground. You have to be your own person to be living with virtue. If you are letting someone else decide what is going to happen in your life, you are living by someone else's core values, not your own. If you have a person in your life who tries to micromanage you, you have got to learn to tell them that while you care about them, you are going to make your own decisions. That concludes what Stoicism is. You stick to your principles. Your decisions are born out of an internal place, and so is your happiness. You hold yourself to upholding these behaviors. That is, essentially, a breakdown of what Stoicism is. So there you have it. You have everything you need to create your own happiness and decide how you are going to think, feel, and therefore behave. Remember that your fate is always in your hands. Conclusion. Being Stoic might seem like a daunting task, but it is simpler than you might think. Actually, a large part of it is just letting go of worries that are only bringing you down. When you focus on things outside of your control or let someone else ruin your day, you're carrying baggage that isn't yours. Stoicism is saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm better than this. If you keep these lessons in your mind and repeat them, you will be able to stay calm no matter what. When you can let rude comments from others go, be content with what you have now and let outside events happen as they will, you will be able to start focusing on the things you can control. Instead of waiting for opportunities, you will start creating them for yourself. Remember, your initial emotional reactions to things are just noise. They are fleeting and not in line with your core values. When a situation starts upsetting you, back away from it for a moment and take a breath. Give yourself some time to cool off before you respond. Not every stimulus requires an immediate response. Wherever you're at in life right now is okay. Instead of agonizing over what you wish you had, which only leads to feeling unhappy, try using what you already have to take the steps you can toward where you want to be. When the day is done, let it go for now. Let everything be in place where it is now.